Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios today. That's Bridgestone Arena, where the Predators tonight are taking on the Montreal Canadiens. As they go for 9 in a row, Barry Trotz will join us at 5 o'clock ahead of the trade deadline. And I've got in front of me, Ian, if you can see right here, I've got in front of me the most important thing, which is my questions I have for Barry Trotz.
Okay.
So we got questions, and Barry, as he always does, we assume will have answers. Ian, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Outstanding. Okay, so I want to start on this, because now that the combine is over, all the talk is about the draft and free agency, and now we're starting to see with the franchise tag deadline looming, teams are finally making decisions. You know, the old man used to always tell us that deadlines spur action, and so we're seeing some of that. Justin Madubuike, for instance, take him off the board. He's going to be tagged by the Baltimore Ravens. Free agency opens the new league year 1 week from today. But I was perusing The Athletic. Dane Brugler is their insider, their draft expert, and he has a new mock draft out. And like every time that I click one of these mock drafts, where do we go? Every time we look right at it, to the Titans. And he said in the little thing when I clicked the link that, we got trades galore in this mock draft. And one of the trades is at number 7, where Dane Brugler has the Tennessee Titans trading to the Minnesota Vikings so that the Minnesota Vikings, who are going to lose Kirk Cousins, so that they can select J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback out of Michigan. He'll be the 4th quarterback off the board. This is no different than any other mock draft. Caleb Williams 1, Drake May or Jaden Daniels 2, the other guy's 3rd. And so he has the Titans trading the 7th pick for the 11th pick for J.J. McCarthy. Now, if you were to say to me, Jared, what do you think about trading out in this year's draft? Are you for it? Are you against it? What do you make of it? Well, my answer would be, what am I getting in return? Like, where am I trading to? What am I getting in return? Who's already off the board? That is an incredibly loaded question. And in this scenario, which Dane Brugler lays out in his mock draft, neither tackle, Joe Alt, nor Olu Fashanu are off the board. So the Titans at 7, with both tackles available, according to Dane Brugler in The Athletic, they're going to trade back to 11 with Minnesota. And in exchange, the Titans will receive 11, 109, which I believe is in the 4th round, 109, and a 2025 second rounder. Boo. And not only does he have the Titans doing that in his mock draft, but then at 8, he has New England, who traded with Atlanta, who went up to 3 to take one of the quarterbacks. He has New England taking Joe Alt at number 8, and he has the Jets at number 10 taking Olu Fashanu with that 10th overall pick, leaving you without either left tackle, and he has the Titans selecting J.C. Latham, the right tackle out of Alabama. Now, there's been some talk because Bill Callahan, a.k.a. Ian.
Big coach.
Big coach in the past has apparently been able to work some magic where he's gone out and he's taken guys like Tyron Smith, who are right tackles in college, and flipped them over to left tackle. There is a theory, I guess, that the Titans could do that with Latham. Now, Trevor's come on our show, and he has said multiple times that J.C. Latham is a right tackle. And so I'm not going to play the game of, we can just flip this right tackle to left tackle. I'm like, whoa now. Let's not get too caught up there. And so this is my long-winded way of saying that if J.J. McCarthy is impressing the league as much as it sounds like he did at the Combine, and if J.J. McCarthy is very clearly viewed as QB4 in this draft, and we know where the sweet spot is between Atlanta at 8 and then that run right there with Minnesota at 11, Denver at 12, I forget who's at 13, but I think they need a quarterback. I mean, there is a grouping right there where all those guys could want to move up. Well, that's great. But I'm not moving up for a 4th-round pick and a 2nd-round pick next year. I'm not moving back.
Raiders are at 13.
They need a quarterback. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not doing that. So if you want J.J. McCarthy, and I'm not drafting J.J. McCarthy, but if you don't want somebody else to draft J.J. McCarthy, you better give me a freaking haul for that pick. A fourth rounder and a second next year, that's not good enough. And again, we can draft trade chart this all we want, and we can say, well, the draft trade chart says that, right, but I don't want to trade that pick. I can draft Joe Alt with that pick, and Joe Alt was excellent at the combine. Joe Alt is ready to go at left tackle, the position that I cannot get in free agency. And I'm going to do that so I can get a second rounder next year? And between that and everybody saying, I don't think the Titans should be going after this in free agency, and I don't think the Titans should be going after that in free agency, and Dane Brugler accepting a second in next year's draft to pass on the two left tackles. I have to ask this question. Are you guys trying to get Ran Carthon fired? Because that is the kind of move that will get him fired. So here's the reality when it comes to me and trading back to that quarterback sweet spot. And I don't care if it is 11. I don't care if it is 12. I don't care if it is 13. Ian, I think New Orleans is at 14.
That is correct.
And then I think Seattle's at 16.
Correct.
Okay, they all need long-term quarterbacks, right? So if you're any one of these teams and you want to trade me for the 7th overall pick, here's the deal. You have to, A, answer my question at tackle for me. You have to answer it for me. And you have to give me next year's one. And I'm going to tell you why I want next year's one. Because I'm not convinced that J.J. McCarthy's that good. So if you're Minnesota and you trade me for J.J. McCarthy and you give me next year's one, J.J. McCarthy's going to be learning on the job. You're going to lose a bunch of games. And that pick that you give me is probably going to be number 4 next year. So if you want to take my left tackle, because again, in this Dane Brugler mock draft, I'll be sitting there with either guy on the board. And if you want to take that left tackle from me, which is what you're doing in order to get your quarterback, you better solve my answer at right tackle, and you better give me next year's one. Now, to all the other teams, how do you feel about that? Because everybody would say, Jared, would you trade out of the 7th pick? What do you think about moving back off the 7th pick? Again, what for? You want me to move from 7 to 11? And you offer me a 3rd round pick in this year's draft, and you offer me your 1st rounder next year, I'll do that. But I'm not doing it, again, unless you solve my left tackle problem, which is a problem that I don't think the Titans can solve in free agency. Unless you solve my left tackle problem, and you got to give me next year's 1st. Because, again, the idea of drafting a right tackle, unless you've got the thumbs up, right, because there's the 8th pick, 9th pick, 10th pick. There's 4 picks that would go down between you and, again, this fictitious trade with Minnesota at 11. And in this case, it seems like your tackles will go at that point. So unless Bill Callahan is sitting there saying, hey, I can take the kid out of Oklahoma and move him to left tackle. I can take the kid out of Alabama and I can move him to left tackle. I can take Fuaga, the kid out of Oregon State, I can move him to left tackle. Unless Bill Callahan swears up and down that he can take all of those guys that are playing right tackle and can move them to left tackle so that I know for sure I'm going to have a left tackle, I'm not making the trade unless you give me next year's one. I'm not doing it. I mean, the idea that Ran Carthon would accept that trade is absurd. All you're getting is, you're not even getting a top 100 pick in this year's draft. You're getting 109, according to the Dane Brugler trade, and a 2nd next year. That's not good enough. You got to give me next year's one if you want to do that. And again, to pass up Joe Alt, now, look, the price may lower. If Alt goes at 5 and Fashanu goes at 6, and now I'm sitting there and I've got my choice of Malik Neighbors or Roma Dunze, but I still need a left tackle, and all the left tackles are gone, now it's a different discussion. But as far as this particular scenario, It's great. I love draft picks as much as the next guy. I was sitting there on draft night in 2017, and I still think this is one of John Robinson's biggest mistakes. But I remember that night being like, trade out, trade out, trade out, trade out. Keep that, pipeline of multiple lottery tickets coming. But you can't do it this year. You can't do it this year because you don't have a left tackle, and there is not a legitimate left tackle option in free agency. We went over the board yesterday. Unless you want to take a risk on 400-pound Trent Brown, who is lazy and is going to get day one money just because there are no left tackles, unless you want to do that, you've got to solve my left tackle issue if you want to take my left tackle from me, and you got to give me next year's first. And I bet that scares all those teams, unless you love J.J. McCarthy that much. So now the question is not for me, because I've just told you what the price is. The question is for you. Denver, Minnesota, New Orleans, Seattle, Atlanta at 8. My question is for you. How bad you want J.J. McCarthy? And I can't answer that for them. But for me, I cannot trade away that left tackle. I already hate the fact that the Titans have put themselves in a position to where if Malik Neighbors, who I think is the number one wide receiver in this draft, and a lot of people have left the combine thinking that Malik Neighbors is the number one wide receiver in this draft, I don't want to put myself in a position to where I have to take the left tackle over Malik Neighbors, but you're already in that position and there's no use of crying over spilt milk. So great job on your mock draft, Dane Brugler. I'm sure it's great, but that trade that you just had the Titans accept, it ain't going to happen with me. The price for my tackle, which would be for me, alt over Fashanu, the price for my tackle is you got to solve that problem for me and you got to give me next year's one. And if you can do that, you can have J.J. McCarthy. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get your thoughts on that. Plus, speaking of J.J. McCarthy, Ian, did I not say last week that we all needed to root for J.J. McCarthy around here?
I think so.
I said go J.J. at the Combine this week because, again, we know quarterback 1, 2, 3 probably. Then who's next on the quarterback market? Maybe the Giants at 6. They hate Daniel Jones, but it looks like they're probably stuck there. The next team is Atlanta at 8, and you're at 7. So go JJ. And apparently from what I was told, and I didn't watch it, so I couldn't tell you this myself, and I really don't know how to evaluate this either. Apparently JJ was not great in the workout, but apparently the NFL, the teams, the executives, the league, they love them. I mean, love them. Do we buy it? We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company. Again, we are live from Bridgestone Arena. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in. Again, that's 615-737-1025. I do want to tell people, Austin Peay. We got some big basketball going on for Austin Peay because tonight they take on North Florida. That's right, in the quarterfinals of the A-Sun tournament at F&M Bank Arena at 7 o'clock tonight. So tickets are available at myfmbankarena.com.
being a quarterback at the University of Michigan and playing quarterback with Coach Harbaugh usually will sharpen you up to any type of adversity. And like I said, we've been through it 100 times. Well, he doesn't make all the throws you want to see, or doesn't throw the ball 50 times a game, but he knows how to win games, and he has been through the limelight. He's won a national championship. And I thought he handled every question coming his way very polished. And when you're sitting there, you try to judge these kids. And this is a kid that, like, if I was in that locker room and he was my quarterback, I would gravitate to him from his leadership standpoint. I'd go want to play for this kid. I wouldn't be surprised if he went to 8. So if I want J.J. McCarthy, and that's what you're trying to do, is not only what you need, but trying to predict what other teams may potentially do. And the way he's been spiraling up, like we always say, ascending, you may have to go in the top 10 to get him.
Hey, that was former NFL GM Rick Spielman on his CBS podcast saying, hey, I mean, that was pants off for J.J. McCarthy, right? J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, the fact that he made it through with Coach Harbaugh, and he's a winner, and he went through all the adversity, and he doesn't throw the ball all that well. But, I mean, if I was looking for a quarterback and I was looking for a leader, J.J. McCarthy is the guy I'd want. And what's hilarious is that Rick Spielman used to be the general manager of the Minnesota Vikings, and the Minnesota Vikings may be a team that really, really wants J.J. McCarthy. Now, we'll know more in a week and a half who really is going to want to trade up, or who really is going to need to trade up to take J.J. McCarthy, because free agency will have come and gone. But again, I'm not giving away J.J. McCarthy. If you've got to get up to, again, he said it looks like he might go at 8. The pick that you would have to go up to in order to get to J.J. McCarthy, Ian, would be what?
7.
7. And who's got 7?
The Titans.
Okay. So if you want that guy that he loves so much, as I've said, you've got to solve my left tackle problem for me, and you got to give me next year's one. Now, here's something that I think is hilarious about J.J. McCarthy. I didn't watch J.J. McCarthy's workout, so I can't comment on this. And I'm not going to go back and watch it, because I don't care how J.J. McCarthy performed, other than, as I said last week, go J.J., so that we can get a general manager like Rick Spielman to call up the Titans and say, oh, I have to have his leadership. I have to have this guy. That's what I want. But you know what I've noticed about J.J. McCarthy? Because I've watched him play enough college ball. I think we all probably have to a certain extent. Which, in fairness, I watched Levis play a little college ball, and I wasn't a huge fan. And then I really watched Levis, and I liked him a little bit better. And I really loved Anthony Richardson after I watched that. J.J. McCarthy is the exact opposite of Will Levis. He is the exact opposite. What is the selling point on J.J. McCarthy? I saw Scott Zolak, who does the midday show in Boston, used to be the Patriots quarterback. Now he's their color analyst on the radio, and you know they're talking quarterback every day up there. And he said, he's like, I don't want this J.J. McCarthy. He can't throw it deep out. Well, I can tell you what Will Levis can do. He can throw a deep out now. The thing about J.J. McCarthy is this, the viewpoint. And Rick Spielman said it there in that cut, which was, look, man, I know he's got his deficiencies throwing the ball, but he's a winner. He's a leader. He goes about his business the right way. What's the knock on Levis? It's not that he can't throw the ball. Everybody knows Levis can throw the ball. Everybody knew Levis could throw the ball last year. With Levis, it's he didn't win enough. And there were all these excuses for him at Kentucky. But again, regardless of whether or not those excuses were fair or unfair, that's not important here. Again, I'm just telling you how Rick Spielman hated Will Levis. But again, with Levis, it was he didn't win enough. It was, is he really a leader? You know, he's got his mayonnaise and his coffee, and he's got his bull crap, and he's taking selfies, and he's, you know, can he be a serious quarterback? where J.J. McCarthy doesn't have to answer that question because he played quarterback for Jim Harbaugh. So with Levis, it is the ability, it is the talent. With McCarthy, it is the intangibles. And so the same people that didn't like Will Levis, for whatever reason they didn't like Levis, he didn't win enough, they were making too many excuses, his attitude didn't seem right, they're going to love J.J. McCarthy. Because J.J. McCarthy is, again, the exact opposite of Will Levis. And think about this. Is Will Levis injury prone? I mean, that's a serious question I'm asking you guys. Is Will Levis injury prone? And the reason I ask that question is because we really don't know the answer. Will Levis got hurt twice last year, but he had a horrible offensive line. Maybe the worst offensive line some of us have ever seen. He got injured at Kentucky in 2022. But at Kentucky, he had a horrible offensive line. J.J. McCarthy's had the best offensive line in college football the last 2 years. So you see how it's unfair to compare? J.J. at Michigan had Blake Corum, the running back, wide receivers galore, and the best offensive line and a good defense and a great coach. Levis had none of that. Levis had Rick Scangarello. His running back, Chris Rodriguez, who was a good running back, got suspended. His offensive line was horrible. And he had Mark Stoops, who's kind of a bozo coaching. And again, Rick Scangarello was the guy who was his OC, who they fired immediately. But that's the difference here. And the one thing I can tell you is the NFL did not love Will Levis last year, including you. Because if you had loved Will Levis would have been off the board before you had picked a guard. But you didn't. So, if everybody didn't like Levis, including you, what does that tell us about how the league is going to view J.J. McCarthy? In my opinion, and I have been wrong before, but in my opinion, my gut tells me that when it comes to J.J. McCarthy, they're going to love him. And they're going to just fall in love with the intangibles and the meetings and the fact that he's a tough guy and he's a leader and And so there are going to be teams that will be calling, especially that glut of teams that is sitting there between 11 and 15, and they see Atlanta at 8. And they will be calling. And they will be wanting J.J. McCarthy. Even though, again, just what little I saw of his college ball, I didn't think J.J. McCarthy was all that good. But I think they will be calling. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And it is funny to me that Stillman, of all people, who didn't like Levis, it is funny that he's the one that is just pants off for McCarthy. But he's not the only one. And again, what did the league tell us about Levis? They didn't like him. What did the league, McCarthy's the opposite of Levis. It probably means they're going to like him. 615-737-1025. We'll hit your phone, 615-737-1025. Plus, an option on the free agent market that I didn't think was actually going to be available for the Titans actually is available for the Titans. We'll do that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. Again, we're live at Bridgestone Arena, where the Predators play tonight. Barry Trotz will join us today at 5 o'clock. Basketball, that's right. Got to talk about Vandy basketball. As be sure to tune in tomorrow as Vanderbilt basketball goes on the road to Kentucky. Pre-game at 7:30, tip-off at 8. Coverage also available on the 102.5 The Game app and at theGameNashville.com. And Vandy baseball gets underway today against Eastern Michigan at Hawkins Field. Pre-game at 4:15, first pitch at 4:30, and coverage is also available there on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 94.9thefan.com. Is the drop-off between Alt and Fashanu worth the extra third-round pick that the Titans theoretically could receive?
Not at left tackle. No way. Not at left tackle. I look at the 49ers, for example. I don't think Brock Purdy, their quarterback, would have had the start to his career that he did. And I don't think the 49ers would be in the Super Bowl if they didn't have Trent Williams at left tackle, a slam dunk, first ballot Hall of Famer who's still playing at a Pro Bowl level. And that position is just that important. Now, but the other positions are important too. And if they decided to do that, there's going to be guys that should be able to be strong contributors that they could pick up in the third round. Olu Fashanu and Joe Alt, those two guys, either one of those, I am super happy with. Okay. I think both of those guys will be 10, 12-year, all-pro level left tackles in the NFL. Everybody else, there's a compromise if you're going to play them at left tackle instead of at right tackle. That's the point that I'm making.
There you go. That was Trevor on our show. Trevor will join us today. We'll get his reaction to what he saw out of the combine. But, again, the Athletic this morning, Dane Brugler, their lead analyst, his mock draft, has the Titans trading from 7 to 11 and acquiring a fourth-round pick and next year's second from Minnesota so that they can draft J.J. McCarthy. And I'm just telling you, that's not enough. If you want J.J. McCarthy, you have to give me next year's first, and you have to solve my left tackle problem. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyUnder.com. One texter says, what do you mean by solve your left tackle problem? And I'll give you an example. The Denver Broncos sit there with the 12th pick. And by the way, I cannot wait to see what they do in free agency. Ian, every time they make a move in free agency, you know I'm going to go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just took on an $85 million dead cap charge for Russell Wilson, and they said yesterday in their statement they were still going to be flexible in free agency. Why? They are saying the quiet part out loud, by the way. Cap's fake. And so for all you cap people and all you people with the pitchforks outside John Robinson's house mad about the $30 million in dead cap for the void years accelerating on Henry and Tannehill, Russell Wilson's $85 million of dead cap, and they're still going to be active in free agency. But let's just use the Broncos as an example at 12, because they probably would like to draft a quarterback, and the only one that they'd be able to draft in this case would be trading with you to get McCarthy. So if Denver calls me, here's what I want. I want 12, which, next year's first from Denver, next year's third from Denver, and I want Garrett Bowles, their starting left tackle. He's got a $16 million salary, and if you wanted to, you could give him a new contract, or you could play him at left tackle, and I don't think the Titans have any pending free agents next year, though I haven't looked ahead to it. But now you've solved my left tackle problem for me. Now, if the salary cap were real, and the Broncos were taking on that dead cap charge that you guys are so afraid with, they'd have to trade you their left tackle in order to get out from under it. But it's not, so that's not a factor. My guess is that trade that I just proposed is too rich, which is exactly why, if I'm the Titans, I'm probably going to end up picking Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu, because, again, when it comes to what it would take in order for you to get me off that pick, where I may have a Pro Bowl left tackle for the next 10 years, you are going to have to buy it from me. But when I say solve my left tackle problem, that's how. Give me your left tackle. Or if you've got a right tackle that can play left tackle, give me him. And he's got to be decent. Garrett Bowles is a legitimate starting tackle in the NFL. His PFF grade's pretty good. So you do that and you give me next year's first, now we're talking. But I'm not just giving it away for charity, which is what Dane Brugler was doing there. One texter says, you sound like a moron when you say guard. No, I sound like somebody who thinks somebody who drafts a guard with the 11th overall pick is a moron. That's what I think. I think anybody who drafts a guard who's not any good, and again with Skoronski, he was fine at the last game of the season. He was terrible at the end of the year. He was fine the last game of the season, but if you draft a guard that high, he better go to the Pro Bowl every year. And right now, Skoronski is 0 for 1. Indy Ben says he would be shocked if a team trades up into the top 10 for J.J. McCarthy. Why would you be shocked? Another texter says J.J. is this year's Will Levis, and he will fall. Again, I just laid it out to you. Everything about Will Levis screams first-round quarterback, right? The arm, the size, the athleticism. I mean, all of the measurables Will Levis has. Like, I guarantee you the Atlanta Falcons, who had that crap bum Desmond Ridder last year, when they watched Levis throw the ball 90 yards down the field, I guarantee you they were like, holy crap, this guy, we could have had him. I promise you the Steelers, I remember Colin Cowherd the day after the Thursday night game at Pittsburgh was like, Pittsburgh might have won, but they've got a problem with Kenny Pickett, and Tennessee has their guy. I guarantee you the Steelers right now would trade you Pickett for Will Levis. They would like to have Will Levis. But the problem is Will Levis turned off the entire NFL, including you, okay? He turned you off. You aren't the genius here. You got lucky. So he turned off the entire league outside of, the Texans, the Panthers, and the Colts because they chose somebody else. But Tampa Bay didn't have a quarterback, and they still don't, by the way, if they don't re-sign Baker. They didn't have a quarterback, and they took Kalijah Kancey, a defensive tackle, over Will Levis. And all these teams that didn't have quarterbacks didn't matter. They all passed on Will Levis. So my whole point of this is if the entire league hated Will Levis, quite frankly, because they didn't like his personality, didn't think he was a leader, thought he was entitled, and he didn't win enough at Kentucky, they're going to look at J.J. McCarthy, who lost one game in 2 years as a starter in college, who they know's got a great leadership personality because he was Jim Harbaugh's quarterback, and they're going to draft him. So you guys think that, oh, no, you watch, he'll be like Levis. No, he's the opposite of Levis. That's the point. And I don't know what matters in the NFL. I don't know if it matters that Levis didn't win at Kentucky because the team he played on sucked so bad. But, again, just talking about how I think these guys are going to kind of figure it out, like, I feel pretty good. Skylar says, Jared, are the rumors of Brian Callahan liking Keon Coleman hinting around to the Titans trading back? There's no way they can get him at pick 38. I also do agree that if they trade back, they need another first back in return. A quarterback sells themselves. Let me just say this about the Keon Coleman thing. He ran a 4.6 in the 40. He very much should be available with the 38th pick. Like Xavier Legette, who TD's been just banging the drum for like the last 3 months, he ran a 4.39. He will not be there, in my opinion, at 38. Ladd McConkey ran a 4.39. I don't think he will be there. Xavier Worthy ran a 4.21. I don't think he will be there. I do think that because Keon Coleman ran a 4.6, I do think that Keon Coleman will be available with the 38th pick. By the way, I heard Kaharski today bad-mouthing Xavier Worthy, basically saying, like, just because a guy runs fast at the combine doesn't mean that he's going to be very good. Chris Johnson was the exception. I mean, I watched, 4 Texas games maybe, especially the Alabama one and the Alabama one last year. I think Xavier Worthy's a pretty good football player. Like, again, I know he blew the doors off with his speed. But when Tyquan Thornton ran real fast at the combine, I didn't know who the hell that was. I had never heard of him. And he ended up in the second round because he ran fast at the combine. Xavier Worthy, don't you guys remember the Alabama game 2 years ago where he was just running right by the 2 corners that are going to go high? Well, I guess McKinstry's hurt. But he was just running right by those corners, and Quinn Ewers was just popping deep shots to him. I mean, he's a good football player. So I think he'll be gone anyways. 615-737-1025. We'll get back into your phone, 615-737-1025. Plus, a free agent who was questionable if he'd get there, and he is getting there, and he could be a fit with the Titans. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
But we got a guy named Bill Callahan, a.k.a. Big Coach, who's one of the best in the business. And I really wish you guys could have seen his profile tape, meeting. It was a clinic. It was a clinic, and everyone left out of there minds blown and coming to the realization that we still got a lot to learn, to come in and what it's going to take to play for him. But I think for a guy like that who's been such a strong developer, of talent at the O-line position, it gives us a little leeway, to bring some guys in and him having a plan on how to develop those guys and get them out on the field.
Shout out to Bill Callahan, a.k.a.
Big Coach.
Big Coach, the offensive line coach. Now, look, I don't know when it comes to the player acquisition front how much we should look at Bill Callahan and say this guy can turn water into wine. Because I talked to Rich Gannon at the Super Bowl, and Rich Gannon made it pretty obvious to me that in his experience with Bill Callahan, and considering that he won an AFC championship with Bill Callahan as his head coach, that Bill Callahan did turn Barrett Sims from water into wine. But at the same time, I think we can all agree they need better players in the offensive line. So the New England Patriots today, as we're getting down to the deadline for franchise tags and transition tags, and so guys, like people have texted into the text line over the months and said, we should go get Jalen Johnson, the corner from Chicago. And it's like, they're going to tag him. They're going to tag him like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Same with T. Higgins, Josh Allen, the pass rusher, all getting tagged. So the New England Patriots today decided to transition tag a safety, Kyle Duggar, who is a decent safety, but a transition tag, meaning that they can match any offer that he gets. That if somebody offers him a contract, the Patriots can thumbs up, thumbs down. If not, he goes. The transition tag is so stupid. And I think only an idiot uses a transition tag, which is why we never see it. But the Patriots, they fired Belichick and then just promoted everybody else, so they got rookies in the end zone right now. And as we learned last year, rookies in the end zone can be problems. So that means Michael Onwenu, their right tackle, their 26-year-old right tackle, is now officially a free agent. I actually thought that they were going to use the franchise tag on Michael Onwenu, not because Michael Onwenu's a really great right tackle, but because it would then at least be something that they would say, okay, we don't have to worry about right tackle. It is obvious to me that Floyd Reese is not working there anymore with the New England Patriots because they decided to transition a safety over a right tackle. So, what do we think about Michael Onwenu? I went back and I looked at his, when I put out the free agency board, I did include him at right tackle. Played 15 games last year, 17 games the year before that, and 16 games the year before that. And in his rookie year, 2020, he played in 16 games. What's that tell us? He's reliable. So that's the first check mark. Now, he played 1 year at right tackle, and he had a PFF grade of 72.5. which I believe is better than all the other right tackle candidates that we've talked about, including Jermaine Illuminor, who is 68.5. He has 1,800 career snaps at guard because he played right guard in 2022, and he's got 1,500 snaps at tackle. Now, his pass block grade is not very good, which is concerning. His pass block grade was 68. Dylan Radunz, by comparison, was 59.7 at right tackle. So, Onwenu is a significant upgrade. 3 sacks allowed last year, 4 penalties. Problem is, you're going to have to give him a boatload of money if you want to bring him in here. So what do we think about Michael Onwenu? Again, I have kind of, at this point, zeroed in on Jermaine Illuminor with the Raiders. 3 years older, played in 17 games each of the last 2 years, is a lot like Onwenu in that he can both play guard and right tackle. He's got 1,800 career snaps at right tackle, which is more than the 1,500 snaps that Onwenu has out there. He's got 534 snaps at right guard, but he allowed 6 sacks last year. However, when they changed, when they moved on from Josh McDaniels and they put Bo Hardegree in charge of the offensive line, or I guess in charge of the offense, Bo Hardegree is now your quarterback's coach, Illuminor played much better. One comparable here. Owenu versus Pittsburgh had a pass block grade of 33.1. Illuminor was 31.5. Pittsburgh is important because I am using them as kind of the line of demarcation, because if you are playing right tackle against the Steelers, Ian, who are you going against?
Watt.
TJ Watt. So how did they do against TJ Watt? They both stunk. But they both stunk about the same. 33.1 for Owenu, 31.5 for Illuminor. Now here's the question. When it comes to what their contracts are likely to be, Owenu is going to probably sign, if I had to guess, as with the richest free agent contract of any offensive lineman this offseason. Illuminor, according to Pro Football Focus, is looking to come in at about, well, their estimate is 2 years, $14.5 million with $9 million guaranteed. So basically a year and a half guaranteed, $9 million for $14.5. It is roughly what you kind of paid Andre Dillard. But this guy has actually played tackle before, and this guy's actually okay at it. So I would still lean Illuminor over Owenu, but I like both guys over the options of Jonah Williams and Mekhi Becton as far as the right tackle position is concerned. So the New England Patriots doing something stupid, which is what stupid teams do, and the Patriots have proven ever since Tom Brady left that they are, in fact, not geniuses. But as soon as they did that, I mean, it gives you another opportunity here on the offensive line. 615-737-1025. So a lot of people are upset because I have said that J.J. McCarthy is kind of the opposite of Will Levis on the text line. I've said that, look, McCarthy, the selling point with McCarthy is doesn't throw the ball great, but he's a winner. He's a leader. He played for Jim Harbaugh. They won the championship. And the selling point for Levis is he's huge. He's athletic. He's got a cannon. They didn't win all that much, but, you know, he's got the measurables. And people are texting into the text line. They're all mad. They're saying, Jared, that's not fair. Will Levis won 10 games his first year at Kentucky. Will Levis won 18 games, Jared. Where? And I'm just here to tell you right now, you cannot compare the level of winning that Will Levis did in college to the level of winning that J.J. McCarthy did. J.J. McCarthy started for 2 years, and he lost one game in the national semifinal in overtime. Every other game, he won. Now, does that mean that I would draft him over Will Levis? Probably not. I like Levis. I haven't studied McCarthy enough to be able to tell you if I like McCarthy's game or not. Just watching it on TV, I didn't. But then again, I didn't really like Levis. And then when I studied him, I liked him. I didn't like him as much as I liked Anthony Richardson, but I liked him. But you guys in your fields, it's amazing what happens in the span of a year or what happens when somebody gets put on your team. Because beforehand, this time last year when I was telling you guys when we were evaluating the quarterbacks, and I would look at it and say, yeah, I really like, I like Levis. I remember, Ian, I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember like a day where I watched that Levis tape against Georgia? And I was like, I watched the tape and I actually liked it better than I liked Hendon Hooker's tape against Georgia. Mm-hmm. And the text line and the callers were freaking furious. Well, they were like, hey, sucks. And
yeah. You get a lot of that around here with the Hendon Hooker, Tennessee, Kentucky thing.
My favorite is I was looking before the Titans played the Colts, the second game here at Nissan Stadium, the one that got Craig Aukerman fired. I was looking to find out what day Chris Ballard talked about Will Levis, because I think Ballard in one of his press conferences alluded to if Richardson wasn't there, they probably would have taken Levis. And so I was looking for, what day it was that Ballard said that. So I went on Twitter and I searched Ballard Levis to see what came up. And one of the first things that came up was some Titans fan who was sitting there laughing about, oh, Chris Ballard's so stupid because he's going to draft Will Levis. Ha, ha, ha. And the guy's picture, because obviously he had changed his Twitter picture since then, was a picture of Levis in an Oilers uniform. And I laughed my ass off. Ugh. because it's just so fickle. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on the program if you want to weigh in. Coming up next, again, Barry Trotz will join us today ahead of the trade deadline at 5 o'clock. But coming up next, I clicked on an article now that it's trade deadline season, and, you know, they've all got the sports nets and the TSAs and the athletics and the Pierre LeBron's they've got all their stuff up. I saw an article today, this morning when I woke up, that I literally had to stop myself and say, hold on. Why are we writing this article? What? We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios, Bridgestone Arena. Tonight, the Predators taking on the Montreal Canadiens, 7 o'clock. Pre-game's at 6, and Barry Trotz, ahead of the trade deadline, is at 5. The Predators go for 9 in a row. Now, let me just say this. I am not going to lie to you. I heard Caroline today. She was talking about, it's a big one tonight. They're all big ones. It's a big one. And I was like, when they went to break, I told her, I was like, yeah, I don't think it's a big one. And she's like, what? I was like, I don't think it's a big one. I think the big ones are out of the way. I really do. Like, now look, if you lose 8 in a row, now you've got a problem. But you're not going to lose 8 in a row, or at least you shouldn't lose 8 in a row. The Predators are good. Hey, we're good. Now, I want them to win tonight because, we're talking about 9 in a row here. But as far as the playoffs are concerned, you're in. You're in the playoffs. And all these other bubble teams, St. Louis, Calgary, Seattle, Minnesota, they know they're out. They're going to start selling here in the next couple of days. So this is not a big game tonight, other than the fact that it's 9 in a row. And I told you guys I would never lie. I would never come on the air and say it was a big game on a day that it's not a big game. And it's not, other than it's 9 in a row, which would be freaking awesome, it's not a big game. And that's a good thing, because that means that you did the work that you needed to do in order to make these games down the stretch. You still have to win some of them, but to make these games down the stretch less juicy and more about getting ready for the playoffs, which is where you're going to be. So that's actually good news. Now, this morning I woke up, and I usually wake up and I flip, ESPN, see what's going on over there, and then I go to The Athletic, see what's going on over there. And so I pull up The Athletic, and there's a giant picture when I pulled it up this morning of UC Saros. And the headline was, Analyzing UC Saros trade value and possible destinations if he's available. And I saw that, and I was like, hold on, wait a minute. And again, it was early in the morning. I'm like, wait a minute. Analyzing UC Saros' trade value if he's still... Have we not been watching for the last 3 weeks at The Athletic? In fact, I think the woman that wrote this article, Willie, texted me and Joe a couple weeks ago and was like, oh, man, she's got the best information. I'm like, I guess apparently not, because she's writing about whether or not they should trade UC Saros. And the article continues to hammer home the idea that the 2024 Predators are not cup contenders, which I would agree with on one hand, but on the other hand, I would argue that they have crossed the threshold where, hey, they could get into the playoffs and they could make something happen. They have officially crossed that threshold, in my opinion. And that Saros, she writes, could bring back the Hall of Halls. Quote, sure, Nashville could wait, but offering a team the potential of 2 playoff runs may thread the needle enough to convince the Predators to leap now, even if it makes them worse in the interim. First off, Barry Trotz has made it abundantly clear. If you knock his socks off for the goalie, and I mean knock his socks off, you can have the goalie. And I think it is also abundantly clear that Barry Trotz has not been offered that knock his socks off offer for the goalie when the Predators were floating around purgatory. And thus, when they started to win, he decided, instead of basically saying, well, nobody was that interested, so we took him off the market, he decided we took him off the market because we're going, baby. You can't fire me, I quit. You can't not give me a good offer for my goalie because I've taken him off the market. And I think the idea of trading Saros right now, as far as things are constructed, I think it's absurd. But it does open up the question that the Predators probably don't want to really address right now. They don't want to talk about right now. And it is something we're going to ask Barry today at 5 o'clock, which is this. Is there any plausible scenario here down the stretch where the success of the 2024 Predators does not hinder the big picture ultimate goal for when we all thought this team would be ready to compete, which I would have argued I wanted to be around 2025, they probably would argue the same thing. But realistically, when they decided this time last year to blow it up and to shake up the locker room and everything else, we're probably more looking towards 26. Because, again, like the guys they drafted last year, Matthew Wood, he's still in college. Tanner Mullendijk, I think, will be in Milwaukee next year. He might be in the NHL next year, but he's probably going to be in Milwaukee next year. And so 26 is when those guys will really start to be in the mix. Same with the younger guys that are starting to develop now. Like Evangelista should be a much better player in 2026. Because, again, on one hand, we begged for forever. We begged for the rebuild. We begged in 21, we begged in 22, and we begged at the start of last year, and then finally midway through the year, they couldn't argue it anymore, and it was like, okay, time to wave the white flag, and they sent Nino Niederreiter to Winnipeg. But they, again, procrastinated. We wanted it. We begged for it. We said, do it, do it, do it. We did. And so if the Predators weren't going to have a good season this year, when it looked like early on in the season, when it looked like they were bad, I told you guys, embrace it. Embrace the tank. Because if we got to be bad, we need to enjoy being bad because we signed up for it. We asked them to do this. But now, I think I can say that we're all pleasantly surprised, or at least I am. You know what? I should talk for me and not for you guys. I am incredibly pleasantly surprised with where this hockey team is right now. They are much better this year than I thought they would be. But again, is there any way that what the Predators do at the trade deadline for the 2024 Predators does not have a negative impact on the 2025, 2026, 2027 Nashville Predators? Because if we're being honest, the idea of not trading Carrier, of not trading Trennan, of not trading Dante Fabro, Saros if you want to include him in the group, I mean, those are picks. Like, those are future assets that you could get something for. And again, you were stupid enough to trade a first-round pick for Ryan Hartman, so there has to be somebody else who's stupid out there too. So I do wonder, you know, this weird kind of, I love what they're doing this season, and everybody likes things right now, but at the same time, when you went into this season in your head and you thought about what this season could be in terms of assets building for the future, are you taking away future assets that you would have in order to put them on the ice this year? And I don't know how the answer can be no. But I will also say the same thing, which is you're in this to win. Like, that's why you do this. You do it to win. And so if you're winning now, why would you stop yourself from winning now so that you can win more in the future? So it's a very complicated scenario the Predators find themselves in, which again, because they're not Vegas, Vancouver, Boston, New York, Florida, Colorado, because they are not a surefire, bona fide cup contender, there will always be this notion that trying to win this year with the guys that are on this team is fool's gold. And as much as I'm enjoying and having fun of what they're doing this year, I know that the big picture is what is to come. Or at least that was the plan, was that would be the big picture. So while I think, again, talking about trading Saros right now is kind of absurd, and I don't have a problem. If Barry Trotz comes here, sits down at 5 o'clock, and he says, Carrier's off the market, Trennan is off the market, Fabro's off the market, we are not selling anybody other than maybe Tyson Barrie. If he sits down and says, I won't have a problem with it. But an argument can be made that you're hurting the 26 and 27 Predators by making that decision. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And then there's another element to this that I do think is important, that you will never see in a spreadsheet, you will never see in an analytic report, you will never see one of the nerds upstairs that went to MIT ever talk about this. but I do think it matters. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number here on the program, 615-737-1025. And Preds fans, do not miss tomorrow night's Smashville Live at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue at 6 o'clock. See your Predator star players up close and personal, plus get autographs and pictures. And this week's special guests are Alexander Carrier and Jeremy Lassonde. Smashville Live is brought to you by the Black Abbey Brewing Company and ESPN Bet Sportsbook.
How much have fortunes changed in the last 2 to 3 weeks for the Nashville Predators?
A lot, because
U2 Day turned this team around.
Well, yeah, and like we said on Friday, the players deserve a lot of credit because it could have sank their season. It absolutely could have sank their season, and they haven't lost since then. So what that says to me is you've got a really professional team. They're pros. And that's a high compliment, I think. I used to think that being called a pro was like a bit of an insult, but I've learned that when it comes to athletes, being called a pro is like a big compliment because it indicates that you understand what it takes to be successful. And those guys are pros.
That was Elliot on his podcast. And now let me ask you a question. When is being a pro a bad thing? Like, hey, you're a pro. How dare you call me that? I've never heard of somebody say that that's a bad thing. But again, I digress. So the Predators have put themselves in a position to, I guess, technically be buyers. You know, the trade deadline, the way it works in the NHL is it's binary. Either you're a buyer or a seller. And in the case of the Predators, where they sit in the playoffs, on any given year in any given organization, they would be buyers. As much as we went into this year thinking it was a rebuilding year or that they would be a playoff bubble team or whatever it may be, like we never thought that they would be firmly in the playoffs, and because they are firmly in the playoffs and their schedule the rest of the way is easy and they should probably cruise into the playoffs, they technically are buyers. But again, they're in the middle, they're beginning a rebuild. They're in the rebuild. And by hanging on to Carrier, hanging on to Trennan, they would be slowing that future asset management gaining program down by hanging on to them. Now, I like Adam Vingan texted me yesterday and said they should trade a second-round pick for Vladimir Tarasenko, and I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. But as much as we love to talk about the spreadsheets and about the, according to the analytics chart, the way the Predators would have to be able to compete with a blah, 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 blah. As much as we talk about that, let's say Barry Trotz decides, look, I'm not going to get a deal done with Carrier because next year I'm going to have Spencer Stastny in that spot anyways. And in the future, I'm going to have Tanner Mullendijk in the lineup. And Carrier is a good player that a team could use right now as a second pair defenseman, especially one of these teams that needs defense. And they might trade me a first-round pick or a second-round pick or something like that in order to get Carrier so I can make the move, get a first-round pick, get a controllable player, perhaps a future superstar, in exchange for dealing off Alexander Carrier, knowing that the drop-off isn't that bad between him and what Spencer Stastny probably is going to be. But at the same time, what you'll never see in the spreadsheet is what that would do to those guys in the locker room. I think one of the big things that happened, I was listening to Boston radio yesterday where they were talking about the Bruins, who I guess got just freaking shellacked by the Islanders over the weekend. And on Boston radio, they were talking about how they need to shake up the locker room, about how they don't have any draft picks, they don't have any salary cap space, but they don't even need to make a future asset trade. They need to ship guys out of there. And I thought to myself, you know what? That's the biggest difference between this team and the Predators chasing after the hope of making the playoffs in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Is that it was the same group every year that was right there on the cusp of doing it, and every year they found a reason to convince themselves to keep that group together. And you know what I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden, they finally smelled the coffee that we had been smelling for a while, and they were like, you know what? Time to rebuild. But what they really did, as opposed to rebuild, is they shook up the locker room. That's what they did. Johansson, gone. Duchesne, gone. Granlund, gone. Ekholm, gone. Ryan O'Reilly, in. And when they signed Ryan O'Reilly and they signed Luke Schenn and they signed Gus Nyquist, there were people that were bitching about those moves because it was like, I thought we were rebuilding. Why are we signing Ryan O'Reilly for 4 years? But that's what Barry Trotz did. He shook up the locker room. He turned it upside down, which is what they needed. So now, if you were to unload Carrier or you were to unload Trennan in order to get a future asset, while it probably does look good from a number standpoint or a spreadsheet standpoint, I do think there is something towards the fact that you challenged your players. Your GM and your coach, you challenged the players. Barry Trotz sat here 2 weeks ago on this show, and he said, if they prove to me 3 weeks ago, and he said, if they prove to me we should be buyers, then damn it, we'll buy. Well, guess what? They did that. They answered the challenge. So I do think there is something to this idea for everybody that wants the assets, and how bad it's assets, and we're, not cup contenders, Jared. And there is something to, hey, man, you challenged those players, and they responded. So now you have to hold up your end of the bargain. So I don't have a problem if they don't make a single trade outside of facilitating one contract, which they can do. I won't be upset come Friday. Now, on Friday, if they don't use that extra spot and all that salary cap space to facilitate a deal, I will be a little disappointed, because that's just a free draft choice that they could get for doing that. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025 here on the program. Texter says, I almost feel a very competitive playoff series may even mess around and win a couple this season or one, which would be great. Next year is the year that the Predators will be contenders. So I think about it like this. The Predators missed the playoffs 2 straight years, 2013 and 2014, and I believe in 14 Rene got hurt. In 2015, Peter Laviolette took over as coach, the 14-15 season. And I don't think they were cup contenders, but they had a good start that year, and they made the playoffs, and they lost in the first round. But Peter said it at the time, and he still says it now. And that is that team, while nobody thought that they were cup contenders at the time, they went toe-to-toe with Chicago, who ended up winning the cup. Again, I don't want to play this game of, if this hadn't happened, or if they'd had another period, or because that's what losers say. But, they blew games. 1 and 4 in that series, and lost them both in overtime. And they blew game 6, too. And I think the moral of the story is that Laviolette felt like in that year, they weren't necessarily sure how to win in the playoffs, but that the next year, 16, where they went 7 with San Jose in the second round, he thought they were cup contenders. And felt that way probably in 18 and 19. So I think that this could be very similar to that, which is that 15 team gave the eventual Stanley Cup champions the best shot they could handle, even if nobody was expecting it right then and there at that time. 615-737-1025. We'll get to more of your phones on this. 615-737-1025. Again, the trade deadline is coming up on Friday. Barry Trotz will join us today at 5 o'clock. And yesterday I heard something, because I don't think the Predators are going to do anything other than facilitate some deals for other teams utilizing their cap space, which is basically just transactional at that point. And I have a reason for it. And somebody told me that, that's just an excuse. But is it? We'll do that next. And your phone, Stillman and Company, live from Bridgestone Arena, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
people were telling me a couple weeks ago, you're not talking about Nashville enough, like all their guys could go. And I think now, Saros, as you said, Novak getting done. And I think it's possible there are going to be more that get done. I don't think that. I just think, Jeff, it's possible that Novak isn't the only. I don't know. I don't know to handicap it, but someone just said to me, don't be surprised if Novak isn't the only extension announced this week. I mean, we'll see where it goes. Nothing's done until it's done. But the Novak thing is a big letdown. I saw in Rink Fries, you mentioned the Rangers. I think he was on Vancouver's list too, and I don't think they were the only ones. I think there were a few teams looking at him. But, someone said to me they might add. And I'm like, what? And they go, not hugely expensive, but they might add. The Predators, all of a sudden the Predators are feeling something.
There you go. That was Elliot on his podcast saying, hey, they could add. They could add. My sense is that they will not. My sense is that they are happy with the team that they have right now, and they think they can win with the team that they have right now. My opinion is that they can win with the team that they have right now. And somebody said to me that, Adam texted me, by the way, when I said that he told me that they should offer a second-round pick for Vladimir Tarasenko.
Oh, is he disputing you?
He is disputing. Did he text you too?
No.
He said, I didn't say they should, in all caps, trade for Vladimir Tarasenko. I just floated the idea, Vingan says, don't make me look bad. So somebody floated the idea about doing something like that. I said, my sense is that the Predators think that a big-time addition like a Tarasenko could ruin the chemistry that they feel like this group has. Again, that's my sense. And somebody said to me, they go, oh, that is such a team answer. That is such a narrative answer, right? Oh, we didn't do something at the trade deadline because we don't want to ruin our chemistry. But at the same time, isn't that kind of the case? Like, this team's got good chemistry. I know it because I see it when I watch the games. You see it in how these lines have meshed together. You see it in the stick taps for the laps they were doing yesterday after Tommy Novak got his contract. You see it. I mean, I flew with him to St. Louis when things weren't going great, and I could see that this group had some good chemistry. And it's like yesterday, a guy called into the midday show and floated out the idea of trading a first-round pick to bring back Mikhail Granlund to take Mark Jankowski out of the lineup. And I listened to Willie, treat that like that was a valid option. And I texted Willie. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wait a minute. You want to take Jankowski out of the lineup? He's playing great. Why would I take him out of the lineup right now? So when it comes to making an addition, I don't want to do anything that screws with my day-to-day lineup that the Predators have. Like, they found what they are. They had tried bringing this guy up, bringing that guy, sending that guy down, adding this guy to the mix, adding that guy. They tried Tomasino. They tried Parsonen. They tried Guaryanov. They tried Liam Foudy, moving guys around lines. Now they've got something. Why add just to add? What's the point in that? And then if you add, and let's say you add something real, and you take Mark Jankowski out, how does that affect, again, the team chemistry where Mark Jankowski is a real part of this team? And I think that's actually like a fair sentiment. So when I had somebody call in yesterday to the midday show to say, trade a first-round pick for Granlund. We did a freaking victory lap when they traded him. Now I want to bring him back? Unbelievable. I understand the idea that Mark Jankowski is not somebody that we should bank on the Predators relying on for the next 10 years as their third-line center. I got it. Or third-line forward. I guess Novak centers that line. But, we shouldn't bank on that. Got it. But right now, he's playing pretty well. Right now, Michael McCarron's playing pretty well. It's when you start giving those guys real money that you run into problems. And I don't foresee the Predators giving those guys real money. I mean, McCarron signed an extension for $1 million. That's good. So I like things the way they are now. And if they were to bring somebody in, and you could argue that, okay, we'll bring somebody in for depth. They got that at Milwaukee. Like, those guys didn't win 19 in a row on accident. So if a forward goes down and they need to go get somebody, they can go get Parson, or they can go get Tomasino. Or if they really want to go get the old Paw, they can go get Cal O'Reilly. Though I think Cal O'Reilly is serving his use in Milwaukee. I think that there's a reason that he's down there. Mark texts into the text line and says, dealing Saros at this point would be a backbreaker to the team. However, secondary moves like Carrier and Trennan make sense. Despite the Predators playing better than expected, this is still a process, and deviation from that would delay the future. That's a fair point to make. And again, that's why I wonder, like, is there any real way that the Predators are not, Robbie Stanley just texted me and said, realistically, dealing a first or second round pick right now would be ludicrous. And I agree. But are you basically giving up a future second round pick by not trading Carrier?
You think you could get a second for Carrier?
I mean, if you gave up a first for Ryan Hartman, I think anything is possible at the deadline.
It seems a bit rich, but maybe you're right.
A first for Carrier?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you could get I don't even know if you could get a second for Carrier.
Oh, you would definitely get a second for Carrier.
You think so?
Yeah, you gave up a second for Lazan.
Yeah.
And Lazan's playing better, no doubt, but Lazan wasn't good enough for a second when you gave it up. Somebody will be desperate. And all these general managers around the league, I mean, LA, I think, has a general manager like this. Edmonton has a general manager like this. Like, there's some general managers. If the Predators make the playoffs and they draw Vancouver in the first round, they lose in 6 games at home, the fans will stand in their seats at the end of Game 6, and the players, after they shake hands, will point their sticks up to the fans, and the fans will give them a big, clapping ovation. 2 days later, Barry Trotz will hold a press conference and talk about getting ready for next season, and everybody will be happy. Some of these other places, you lose like that, you're fired. And that's what one of those GMs, what does he give a rat's ass about his second-round pick next year? He may not make it. So I definitely think for Carrier, you could get, Tanev was like a second, a prospect, and something else. And Tanev is better, but that's why, again, it's, second. One texter says, Jared is talking David Poile logic. Just good enough to barely make the playoffs is good enough. This has been the Predators' history for decades. Except, first off, number one, I don't think the Predators are just barely going to make the playoffs. The Predators are going to make the playoffs. Again, this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the hour, which is when Caroline said today, this is a big game tonight. It's not. You've won so many games now that it's not a big game. You can lose tonight, and it's not the end of the world. Now, I don't want to lose because I'd like to see 9 in a row, 10 in a row, 11 in a row. I would keep this thing going as long as possible. But it's not the end of the world if you lose tonight. If you had gone to St. Louis when this whole thing started and you had lost, that's the end of the world. Because they said going into that, our season is on the line. When you're fighting to get back into the playoff mix and you're about to play LA, who has one of the wild card spots, that is a big game. When you are playing Minnesota here, who has a shot, an outside chance at making the playoffs, in which they got to catch you, beating them, that's a 4-point swing, that's a big game. Saturday against Colorado, which could be a potential playoff preview, but is a legitimate measuring stick game for, have you actually proven yourself to be a competitor? That's a big game. Tuesday night against Montreal after you've won 9 in a row and you've got an 80, 90% chance, whatever it is, to make the playoffs, it's not a big game. And that's good. So don't give me this, that's the David Poile way of just barely making it to the playoffs. That's not true. This team is not barely in the playoff picture. This team is firmly in the playoff picture. The second thing is, I am just wondering aloud if it is worth not having that third-round pick that you would get for Trennan or that second-round pick that you would get for Carrier in order to carry those into the playoff run that you're probably going to have. Scott has been waiting and is up next here on the program. Thank you for calling. What's up, Scott?
I think tonight is a big game, and I agree with you that they're in the playoffs. But if you take care of business this week, you've got 3 imminently winnable games coming up. If you take care of business, you're now closer to second place in the division than you are not making the wild card. Mm-hmm. And it's an attainable goal. And that's also the reason I would like to see him add Tarasenko or
aren't you the guy that called the midday show yesterday and wanted Granlund in for Jankowski?
Well, Jankowski is not the reason they've been winning games.
That was your call. Was that your call yesterday, Scott?
That was my call.
Scott, what were you thinking yesterday? Granlund?
Granlund is the career
national
Predator. He has the second most assists in franchise history in a season. He's not garbage.
He sucks. He sucks. Oh, he sucks. I remember last year. Go ahead.
Last year, the last 15 games, he stunk. 2.5 years prior to that, he was the team MVP the year before. He was penalty kill. He made the power play go. He set, other than Roman Yossi's 76 assists, he has the second most assists in franchise history. The point is, there are a lot of guys out there. Enrique, I wish Detroit was losing more. They might let go of Patrick Kane, but there's a lot of guys that are going to be free agents that you could add. Jankowski is not the reason you've been winning. He went in the lineup the first game of the win streak, and you could add somebody on the second line. It's the second line, Jared, not the third line, that could score more. And and if they keep winning and they get out of the wild card position and into a position where they can host home game advantage at least one series, now you're talking, and that's what I'm looking at.
Scott, I think you're getting too greedy, and I also think you need to check yourself on Granlund because he does suck.
He does not suck.
He sucks.
He's best player. No, that's just a stupid Stillman
I
take
could
that
not.
You
It is not. It is not a look. I say a lot of people suck. I get it. Thank you for your call, Scott. I say a lot of people suck. I get it. And there are a lot of times that maybe suck is a little too strong. On Granlund, it's not. He sucks. Like, I could not, when they acquired him for Kevin Fiala, like Porth, I had never heard of this guy. And I've watched the Predators plenty, and I had never heard of this guy. And Porth was like, no, trust me, he's good. I'm like, okay. Then I watched him play, and he didn't do anything. And I'm like, this guy didn't do anything. And they're like, well, it took him a while coming in here to adjust to the team, and okay. The next year, he didn't do anything. Then Laviolette got fired, and for about a 2-week period right before COVID, Granlund was good for 2 weeks. Then, when it came to Granlund, nobody wanted him after the bubble. Nobody wanted him. He sat out there in free agency like a rotting vegetable in the crisper, and so he signed a 1-year, low-dollar contract with the Predators. He had a good year in that turnaround, that short COVID year, that David Poile had to give him 4 years at $5 million a crack. And then he went back to doing absolutely nothing. And last year, the Predators, right ahead of the trade deadline, played Pittsburgh at home. And I sat up in the media seating, and I talked to somebody who would know. And I said, why does Granlund suck so bad? And they looked at me, and they said, he's had 2 open looks at the net, and he hasn't even shot it. And we laughed about it, like literally up there, ha, 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 ha. And then Pittsburgh traded a 2nd-round pick for him. I couldn't believe it. It was like Pittsburgh gave you a get-out-of-jail-free card on this $5 million albatross of a contract. And now Scott wants to go back to it? No. I don't want Grant. He sucks. I don't want the same losers that got you into the same mess in the first place. That's why I like the fresh blood. Do I think Mark Jankowski is the answer to our prayers of a big boy forward? No. But he's doing a good job, so why am I going to take him out of the lineup? He's playing well. He's a smart player, and he is doing really well, including in his own end, and I think he's helped out Novak, and I like Jankowski right now. And if it's not broken, I'm not going to fix it. You're fine the way you are. And if you're going to go get players, like at least with Tarasenko, like Tarasenko's a good player. Granlund is not. I don't want anything to do with that guy. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll go back to your phone. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
I mean, I guess I only looked at it as all steam ahead. I didn't really look at it as anything else other than that. I know maybe peripherally from the outside, you might think that, but individually, obviously, I'm highly competitive. I want to win, and I think our group is built of some serial winners that want to win. So I think that I have won. So I don't think that was ever a mindset. Like I said, peripherally, maybe you might think that, but I think in our locker room, in our group, we're pushing forward.
Hey, that was Andrew Burnett. I mean, that's a great sentiment, and I do like Andrew Burnett, but come on now, babe. Like, we knew this was going to be a rebuilding year, and when it looked like it was going to be a rebuilding year, we weren't yelling and screaming, and we weren't mad at you. Well, I wasn't mad at you. And the only call I took that was an anti-Andrew Burnett call after the Dallas game was somebody who said, all these fans getting on Andrew Burnett after only 56 games. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. There are people that are mad at Andrew Burnett? And so that was my extent of it. And that's because we knew the context of the season. But it's a nice story now to say, oh, we were never worried about that. And the players shouldn't be worried about that. The players don't have anything to do with rebuilding. Oh, we'll be good in a couple of years. If you have that kind of mentality, you won't be here. And they know that. So I get it, but we know what this year was about, and we should be happy that this has been a pleasant surprise. So the text line is going bananas about Scott and Franklin's call on Mikhail Granlund. One texter says, whatever drug Scott and Franklin is on, I want. Granlund isn't worth a used washing machine. The only thing greater than trading Granlund to Pittsburgh was the haul they got for Tanner Jeannot. April in Portland said, Scott is crazy. Getting a second-round pick for Granlund was a gift. I would lose my mind if he came back. I agree with you. He sucks, in all caps. Ed said, Jared, I'm backing you up 100% on Granlund. He should stay gone. The good year he got was because he got assists for being on a line with Forsberg and Duchesne when they had an amazing season, but he plays like the kid on the team that is scared to have the puck and passes before the other team gets close. But I tell you, I remember when they traded for Granlund, and I remember how it was like, I remember like, this guy never scores. Like, why did they get him? Oh, no. He's a playmaker. Uh-huh. A playmaker who never scores. And then he got that one lucky goal where I think he shot it like into somebody's jersey against Dallas in the playoffs and won a game. And other than that, I mean, good riddance. One texter says, I'd rather keep Dante Fabro than trade for Granlund, and I complain about Fabro all the time, so that should say something. Agreed. By the way, Fabro's playing a lot better right now. Ian, Fabro's playing a lot better.
He's playing solid.
Another texter says, Mikhail Granlund does. I'm glad I'm not the one.
You guys are being too hard on Granlund.
Granlund's terrible.
Not terrible.
Terrible. Like, I was so... I couldn't believe that somebody gave you a second-round pick for him. That's like when you're like, I don't know if you can get a second-round pick for Carrier. You got a second-round pick for Granlund in that contract.
And you're blaming Granlund for this or complaining about him for this for some reason?
No, I'm just saying that, if you're saying that I can't get a second-round pick for Carrier, I'm telling you I probably can because I got a second-round pick for Granlund, and he stinks.
Yeah, well, forwards are more valuable than defensemen.
And not only that, but... I mean, San Jose only has Granlund on their team because they had to take him in the Carlson deal. Like, it's the only reason he's there. One texter says, too many bad takes for anyone to listen to Jared's opinion on how good or bad NHL-level players are. Let me tell you something now. Here is how I evaluate a player when it comes to the Predators and a trade. And it is called the Mikhail Granlund rule. If I don't know who that player is, then I don't want him. That is what I feel like. I watch enough hockey that I know who all the good players are, like the actually good players. So when you go out and get somebody, like I know who Ryan O'Reilly is. So when you sign Ryan O'Reilly, I think he's a good player because I know who he is. When they traded for Granlund, I had been covering the team for like 4 years at that point. So I had probably watched they played Minnesota, like 6 times a year, 4 times a year? How many times they play Minnesota, a Central Division team?
Now it's either 3 or 4. So at times it's been up to, 6.
Okay. And I never noticed this guy. Like, I never noticed this guy. They trade for him. Port's like, oh, no, he's good. And then, he was terrible. So I call it the Granlund rule. If you trade for someone and I don't know who it is, they're not very good. If they were good, I would know. I mean, unbelievable. Oh, man. Not hard on Granlund. Mike from Nashville says Granlund was a cornerstone in Minnesota. Good. He should go back there and reunite with his old buddy John Hines. And then that way they'd never win a game and I'd never have to worry about him again. Dexter says if we're talking about Granlund coming back, I'd rather have Russell Wilson on the ice. Boy, that's a hot take. One texter says you could probably get a second-round pick from the Sharks if you take Granlund from them. I don't even know what we just spent 30 minutes on, or not 30 minutes, but enough on Mikhail Granlund. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. There is 1 week left in the NFL's 2023 league year, which means that this time next week, free agency will be official. And I do wonder what Titan fans are actually expecting the Titans to do. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 through the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. 1 hour from now, Barry Trotz will join us right here ahead of the Predators and the trade deadline. By the way, I do have one follow-up that Adam Vingan sent me. This was from, I guess, a story from the guy who covers the Penguins for The Athletic after the Penguins fired their general manager. Quote, Hextall's most infamous trade was the extraordinary decision to acquire Mikael Granlund, who is one of the NHL's worst values. Hextall gave up a second-round pick in this season's rich draft for Granlund. He even agreed to pay Granlund's full salary for 2 more seasons after this one, counting $5 million against the cap. Granlund responded by scoring 1 meaningless goal in 21 games. 2 league sources of mine told me they literally laughed out loud when they heard about this trade, wondering what exactly they were thinking. Unbelievable. Okay, free agency is 1 week away in the National Football League. And I got a question for all these Titan fans out here, because I have seen a lot of pre-excuse making for the Tennessee Titans. Oh, we can't fill all of our holes in one off season, Jared. What do you expect us to do? What are the expectations here for what the Titans are going to do next week in free agency with all that cap space you guys have been talking about? When the Titans decided to give up on the season, which was when they traded Kevin Byard to the Philadelphia Eagles ahead of the Falcons game, when the Titans unofficially gave up on the season, you guys started pumping how great this year would be. The fact that you might have a young quarterback to build around, and all that cap space to spend in free agency. And now, as we're 1 week away from free agency, I feel like the narrative is starting to change a little bit. Now, I don't think Rand Carthon or Brian Callahan gave us any hints, or at least I hope they didn't give us any hints, that they aren't going to be spenders. They just said, well, we have to spend wisely, we have to be smart, we have to, and I just think that's a disclaimer. I think that's so an agent doesn't think that they'll sit down with them and say, you've got all the money, so we want all of it. But again, what my expectations are and what your expectations are may not be the same. And that's why I want us to get on the same page here. So what do you want out of the Titans? What do you think they should do 1 week from today? Do we expect that the Titans are going to go big, right? Christian Wilkins is probably the top unrestricted free agent on the market that isn't Kirk Cousins, because it does sound like Chris Jones is ultimately going to sign a deal in Kansas City. But he hasn't signed his deal in Kansas City yet, which means that he may get to free agency and maybe it is Chris Jones and Christian Wilkins. And again, that is big game hunting. Or is it going to be a bunch of guys that we don't even really know who they are? Like maybe we've heard of them, but we don't really know who they are, and we'll just trust the Titans that they're signing the right guys. Because I've decided the way that I'm going to look at this is not exactly what the moves they make are, but it is what the moves that they make will produce. And that is a competitive football team in 2024. I don't know about you guys. I expect the Titans to be competing next year. And I know they were bad this past season. And I know the offensive line was atrocious. But you can't make the argument that the ball didn't bounce your way, or that you played in 7 one-score games last year, or that it's a good thing that you have all this cap space because John Robinson ruined it because he didn't have all that cap space, and then not ask your team to try to compete the next year, especially after the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars just proved, no, you can go from worst to first in back-to-back seasons. So I don't know how they're supposed to go about doing this. I saw John McClain put out a tweet today in which he was like, Nick Caserio wasn't aggressive in free agency. They've built this thing from the ground up. And I saw that, and I was like, guffaw. The Texans had the 5th highest payroll in the NFL last year. Where do you think Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz and Shaq Mason and George Fant and Robert Woods and Jimmy Ward and Denzel Perriman and Sheldon Rankins. And where do you think all those guys came from? Do you think the Stork delivered them to the Texans? No, they spent. And we laughed, and I thought it was crazy talk too when Jacksonville gave Christian Kirk a gazillion dollars and totally reset the wide receiver market. And remember, teams were going to be mad at Jacksonville for that. I'd say it worked out pretty well for them. So regardless of if the Titans think that they can scout the film better than anybody else and they can bring in these Scarbinis that we don't know anything about, like Coleman Shelton, the center from the Rams who just got cut last week, as opposed to Tyler Biadasz, who's a former Pro Bowl center, or Andre James, who's been a starter in the league for a while. If they think they can do that, so be it. But they better be competing, and they better be winning next year. And if they're not, I don't want to hear, well, Jared, we got so much cap space coming, because that's all you've talked about since October is how much cap space you've had. And now you're telling me I can't use it? You know who did that? Indy. Every year, I remember every year it was Indy's got $70 million in cap space. Every season, we had to be lectured about how much money Indianapolis had. And every year, Chris Ballard would say, well, we just felt like we weren't going to use the money the right way this year, so we just didn't. They just sat on it. And what's Indy got for that? Nothing, because they suck. So, I mean, if they're going to come to us next week and tell us to be happy with Tyler Boyd at wide receiver and Kenny Moore at corner and Cameron Shelton at center and who's one of these real crap bums at tackle? Jonah Williams at tackle. I mean, it's just the same thing they did last year. Dondre Dillard. Same thing. And that's fine. Good luck to you. But if you do that and you don't win, you go. Period. And I think maybe that'll get them to understand that, hey, if you're not going to spend the money, somebody else will. Because if you don't spend it this year, you'll have it next year. And if you don't, and if you spend it this year, you'll still probably have some more next year. But what are the expectations around here? To me, the expectations are to go get players to go win. To go get players to go surround the quarterback with guys that he can depend on and guys who can actually make plays on the football field. The goal for me is to get people that come in here that don't just put up tackling stats like Aziz, but actually make differences in ball games. That's what I'm talking about. And if that's Christian Wilkins and you got to spend $100 million for him, so be it. But I don't want to be told for October, November, December, January, February, for 5 months, I don't want to be told, we've got the most cap space in the league, Jared, and then get nothing on Christmas. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And I did the corner board today, the free agent board at corner. There's one guy I like. One. The other guys, I got issues with. We'll do that next in your phone. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
you got to be careful. I mean, there got to be players to spend the money on, right? You can't just spend it just to spend it. But when you look at free agency, there's a lot of different ways to acquire a player. One of them is free agency. Now, those are proven players. You're paying a premium, and it's expensive, right? But you're getting a proven player. You know what you're getting. It's kind of like, I like to say, there's two products that I love in my life, Apple and Breitling watches, right? So I'm willing to pay retail for those things. I know it's predictable. It's high performance. I know exactly what I'm getting. When you look at the draft, that's wholesale. There's a potential it's cheap, as well as you have the potential to hit big in that area. And then there's a part in free agency that a lot of people forget about, and that's cap casualties. I like to equate that, if we can continue the theme here of products and things of that nature. Well, my wife loves Costco, and so do I. It's, cap casualties is like going to Costco. You're going to get a really good product at a good value, and that's another area that you can play as you build the roster.
There you go. That was Chad Brinker on the Titans podcast saying, hey, I like Apple and Breitling watches, and I'll pay for those, and that's what free agency is. And then the other ones are cap casualties. We haven't played that cut in a while. It does feel like a very condescending cut, right? Like telling us the different ways to acquire players. Like, no, we got it. We understand, Chad. So I've been going over the free agent board. We will have our official free agency plan on Friday. We do it every year. The Stillman and Company, it's the one day we pretend that the salary cap matters because we have to make the contracts fit the cap that Russell Wilson, $85 million in dead cap. You people still think that thing's real? Come on now. They're giving Russell Wilson $39 million. $39 million. And he's not even going to play for him next year. So don't get me started on that. But I did start to go over corners today. And I did not do, Ian, I'm so happy I didn't do any work on Jalen Johnson because I figured he was going to be franchised. And today,
he got tagged.
He got tagged. So I got 5 options. I mean, these are legitimate starting corners. They're ranked by Pro Football Focus. Kendall Fuller, Chidobe Awuzie, Stephon Gilmore, Steven Nelson, and Kenny Moore. Ian, without having done any research on that, is there any one of those guys that you would pound the table for and say, I got to have them?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I felt the same way. I mean, I looked at Nelson. I know he's a starter. Gilmore, I mean, he's kind of old in the tooth, so I was
Kenny Moore does make some plays against the Titans.
Maybe. Awuzie, he's started for a while. Fuller, he started for a while. When I went through the numbers, there's only one guy I'm really all that interested in, that I'm zeroing in on, and that is Kendall Fuller of the Washington Commanders. Fuller played 15 games in 23 and 17 games in 22. What's that mean? He's reliable. So if you pay him, there's a pretty good chance that he'll play in those games. He was with the Commanders in 2020 to 2022 under Chris Harris as his defensive backs coach. He had 2 pick sixes in 2022, 5 interceptions in 22 and 23. He had a 92.1 coverage grade against Buffalo. And his worst coverage grade of the year last year was against Chicago. I'm guessing that was that's got to be totally screwed up because of Justin Fields. Got good grades versus decent teams. He's a corner, not a slot corner. He only had 28 slot snaps last year, only 2 penalties last year, and 10 yards per reception against him. So when he gives up plays, he's not giving up the big plays. Chidobe Awuzie, meanwhile, played 15 games last year, but 8 the year before. Has not had an interception in 2 years. His grading has been worse 3 years in a row. He's gotten worse since 2021, which was a decent season for him. He had a horrible grade against Buffalo, 8 targets, 5 catches. He allowed 12.8 yards per catch and 4 penalties last year. 12.8 yards per catch isn't that bad. Gilmore, 13.1 yards per catch, 6 penalties. Again, 2 penalties for Kendall Fuller, 6 for Stephon Gilmore. He'll be 34 years old. And he did intercept the football, and he did play in 17 games last year and 16 games the year before that. So I would jump Gilmore ahead of Awuzie in terms of who I want. Steven Nelson played 11 games in 2023, 15 in 2022. That's not that great, but he did have 4 picks, which is good. He was with Denard Wilson in 2021 in Philadelphia, but how about this? Again, Fuller is 10 yards per reception. Nelson, 16 yards per catch. Not sure I love it. Now, his best game last year was last year, 12 the year before that. 3 interceptions last year, not bad. 5 penalties, not bad. The problem is 3,500 career slot snaps. He's a slot. I don't think I need a slot corner, do I? Plus a 79% completion percentage. Now, I think some of that is because he's playing in the slot and because he plays for the Colts, who don't allow the big play. And that is shown by his 9.3 yards per reception. I guess that's a long-winded way of me going over the free agency board with you and saying Kendall Fuller is the best guy on the market. And Kendall Fuller has played under your defensive backs coach. So it's going to cost you. Now, Pro Football Focus thinks that Kendall Fuller will come in at 3 years, $40 million with 20 guaranteed. That's a 13.3 average. Give him 15. 3 years at 15. So what would that be? 45. 3 years, 45 guaranteed to 2 years guaranteed at $30 million. Get Kendall Fuller and be done with it. And this is a guy I would overpay for. When it comes to overpaying players in free agency, the only thing that matters is, do you have to have that guy? Like, if I have to have that guy, I have to overpay. That's why the Predators gave 4 years to Ryan O'Reilly, because they had to have that guy. If it's like slot receiver, and I've got Curtis Samuel, who's decent, and Tyler Boyd, who's decent, and Darnell Mooney, who's a slot. Like, I got guys there. I know that, okay, well, if I don't get Tyler Boyd, then I can get Curtis Samuel. And if I can't get Curtis Samuel, then I can get Darnell Mooney. That's different. This position, I am circling Kendall Fuller, and I am saying I would pay him on day one, even if it's an overpay. Even if there are 31 other teams, and there's no way to know about this because it would be collusion and it would be against the law, but I would not even think about it. I would make sure that Kendall Fuller is a Tennessee Titan. I am convinced of that. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I'm going to run these down quickly. One texter says the game against Chicago, DJ Moore had 8 catches for 230, and I believe Fuller was primary coverage on him. I'd have to go back and look at it. Another texter asked about Quadre Diggs from the Seahawks. Safety is a position where, honestly, everybody who's expensive is getting cut. Kyle has been waiting patiently and is up next here on the program. What's up, Kyle?
Hey, Jared. I got a good excuse for Amy for you. We have a bottom 5, maybe even 3 roster right now. Our good players are free agents. We haven't been drafted well, so we don't have any good young players. It's going to I want to spend the money on a corner, top corner. Everything else is going to take $5-7 million deals. I see what they're saying. We need at least 2 safeties. Hooker and Molden are free agents next year. 2 linebackers.
Well, you don't need them if they're free agents next year. You would need that next year.
But you have to have a plan ahead. You know what I mean? Draft you one, he's ready the next year.
That's what free agency is. Like, that's the point. Is you don't need – it's safety. There's 100 safeties out there right now. There will be 100 safeties out there next year.
I want one at $5 million. I don't want one at 14. I don't want a middle linebacker at 8, 10. I want 5 because we have 16 holes if you do the math.
So you want to go cheap?
I want to Floyd used to say if you got a bad line, you go heavy, you double up on the offensive line, you fix it, and the next year you double up and draft 2 or 3 guys in the secondary. We're so bad right now. That's the philosophy.
So I don't remember him saying that. I'm not going to say he didn't say that, Kyle. You may be right. I don't remember that. Thank you for your call. But this idea that the Titans are going to patch this team together back with a bunch of Azeez Al-Shairs, I mean, you're going to get Azeez Al-Shair results. Like, to me, I am going after 5 guys on day one of free agency that I need today. I'm getting my left tackle in the draft, and I'm going to get a receiver at 38. And I'm full speed ahead. But this idea of, oh, no, we need to just go ahead and get $5 million safeties, those guys that take $5 million contracts only take one-year deals anyways. It's like Sean Murphy-Bunting last year. And that stuff you can worry about down the road. You want to sign Chris Moore. I'm talking about day one next week. Trevor will join us next. His reaction to the Combine, his thoughts on free agency as we approach it. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
being a quarterback at the University of Michigan and playing quarterback with Coach Harbaugh usually will sharpen you up to any type of adversity. And like I said, we've been through it 100 times. Well, he doesn't make all the throws you want to see, or doesn't throw the ball 50 times a game, but he knows how to win games, and he has been through the limelight. He's won a national championship. And I thought he handled every question coming his way very polished. And when you're sitting there, you try to judge these kids. And this is a kid that, like, if I was in that locker room and he was my quarterback, I would gravitate to him from his leadership standpoint. I'd go want to play for this kid. I wouldn't be surprised if he went to 8. So if I want J.J. McCarthy, and that's what you're trying to do, is not only what you need, but trying to predict what other teams may potentially do. And the way he's been spiraling up, like we always say, ascending, you may have to go in the top 10 to get him.
A lot of people don't like J.J. McCarthy, but Rick Spielman right there, former NFL general manager, now with CBS and SiriusXM, he's sitting there saying, hey, there are going to be a lot of people that like this kid. And if you want to get J.J. McCarthy, and if you want J.J. McCarthy to be your starting quarterback, you may have to get up to 8 where Atlanta is. And the only way to get in front is Tennessee. And in Dane Brugler's mock draft at The Athletic, that's exactly what he has. A trade at 7, where the Tennessee Titans trade with the Vikings and receive pick number 11, pick number 109, which is in the 4th round, and a 2025 second rounder for number 7 in the right for them to draft J.J. McCarthy. The problem is that Joe Alt goes off the board at 8, and Olu Fashanu goes off the board at 10, and the Titans are stuck at 11 drafting J.C. Latham, the tackle out of Alabama. That's not going to work. I have to figure out a way to be able to get my left tackle. But the more that McCarthy goes up the boards, the more I'd say there's a possibility that there could be a trade. But again, the Titans don't have a left tackle, and there is not a left tackle in free agency for the Titans to go get. So if somebody's going to trade for me, if they want J.J. McCarthy, as I've said earlier today, you're going to have to solve my left tackle problem for me. Now, at the Combine, all those wide receivers ran so fast, and there will be a fast outside receiver for the Titans to be able to draft at 38, which I think probably at least alleviates some of the question marks that surround what they're going to do big picture of, what if you pass on Malik Neighbors or you pass on Roma Dunze? At least that in and of itself exists one way or another. So I look at that and I think, did J.J. McCarthy do enough to warrant a trade up? And if he did, where can the Titans trade up to make sure that they still get their left tackle? Because you're not getting that in free agency. Also, all those receivers ran fast. What about Keon Coleman and his 4.6 40 time? And then, did anybody show in this Combine, and this is a Bill Callahan question as much as anything, did anybody show that they can move from right tackle to left tackle? Trevor Maddich joins us now in the program. Trevor, let's start with these, proposed trades. And the idea of J.J. McCarthy being that popular that you'd have to jump Atlanta at 7 or at 8 to get to Tennessee at 7. I love the idea of picking up more picks. What I don't like is the fact that could cost me my left tackle and Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu. What do you think of all the talk of J.J. McCarthy and perhaps trading with the Titans, where Denver, Minnesota, the Raiders, those teams that would need a quarterback sit?
I don't like J.J. McCarthy in that role. And the thing is, it's too risky to take him that high in the first round, in my opinion, and especially too risky to trade up for him. The reason is that he didn't have to carry a team. I mean, he had the benefit of a fantastic defense the entire time he was there at Michigan. He had one of the best offensive lines in all of college football, the best, for 2 out of 3 years there. They won the Joe Moore Award 2 out of 3. And this last year Washington's offensive line won the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in college football, but you can make a good case that Michigan's was still better this year. They're a run-first offense. That means that you've got safeties down in the box to try to stop the run, which makes it far easier to read what the coverage is. When you take one guy out of coverage and put him in the box, it means that there are far fewer options for defensive coordinators to put out there in terms of coverage nuances and variations. And then the other thing is, at the combine, did he make up for any of this? So that stuff's unknown. Let's put it that way. So it's unknown what he can really do if he really has to. At the combine, he did some good things, but he struggled with the out routes. Now, some of that might have been new receivers, and they were at a different depth than he expected, but other quarterbacks didn't. Michael Penix Jr. didn't. Others threw really, really well. And so I would not, if I'm the Vikings or anybody else, be trading up to number 7 to take J.J. McCarthy.
So if they do, though, I understand that's your opinion, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, though I haven't studied McCarthy. If he is clearly the fourth quarterback and they go 1, 2, 3 off the board, and Atlanta's at 8, and we know they need a quarterback because Desmond Ridder is not the answer there, at that point, I love the idea of trading out of 7, except that I have to get a left tackle. And Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu probably won't be available at 11, 12, or 13. So, with that being said, did any of these right tackles, Dane Brugler's mock draft at The Athletic has the Titans drafting J.C. Latham, a right tackle. Did any of these right tackles at the combine show you something that makes you think that Bill Callahan can flip them to left tackle the way he did with Jedrick Wills or the way he did with Tyron Smith?
Well, the guys who worked out, not really. You talk about J.C. Latham. He was a right tackle and he played a little bit of right guard at Alabama as well. He's a massive dude, but he gets too far over his skis. In other words, he will overset speed rushers at right tackle. And the reason you do that is because you don't think you're fast enough to get into the right spot. And so that's a problem when you're at left tackle, when you'll have even more speed guys out there. And when you watch J.C. Latham do his agility drills for a guy that weighs, 340, whatever he was, this big guy, he moved well for that. But you've got to be a gazelle out there at left tackle because of the nature of the speed guys you're having to block in space, the guys you have to stay in front of. And he just looked a little labored to me doing those agility drills compared to what you'd need at left tackle. Another possibility is Talisi Fuanga, big old right tackle from Oregon State. I think he's got a chance to do it, but he's got short arms also. And so, he's 33-inch arms. A lot of people think that's why Peter Skoronski can't play left tackle. So I'd worry a little bit about that as well. Amarius Mims, the right tackle out of Georgia that's got 8 starts. He is massive. He is fluid. He is athletic. But injuries and other future draft picks ahead of him meant that he has very little experience. And so you might take him over from right tackle to left tackle, and he probably will excel at some point. But he will need time to develop. I'd be very surprised if he can go in there year 1 and be your starting left tackle. Maybe year 2. Is that what you want to risk? Now, you can put him over there at right tackle, and he'd be very, very good. The other guy people are talking about is Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. Right tackle, tall guy, big, very fluid, but he plays too high. And so do you really want to put another guy out at left tackle that's going to have an edge rusher stab him with one long arm right in between the numbers and drive him back into the quarterback because he plays too high? Again, he may turn into a good left tackle. I don't know, but it's a big risk. To me, if you're going to take that risk, the guy I'd be targeting almost is Troy Faltanu out of Washington. He played left tackle for them last year. He was phenomenal. He's only 6'4", but his arms are 34.5 inches. He's got pretty long arms, and he was a fantastic pass protector for them at left tackle. A lot of people have him projected inside at guard, and he could play inside at guard, but at the same time, if you're going to trade out, because somebody else wants that 7 spot, if you want a left tackle, And if Olu Fashanu is not available where you trade down to, Troy Fautanu just might be the guy you want. So what I'm saying is this. You mentioned Joe Alt. He's the best left tackle in the draft, maybe the best tackle, maybe the best offensive lineman in the draft. And then you've got Olu Fashanu out of Penn State, also a left tackle. Those two guys, in my opinion, are the best risks to start and excel on day one at left tackle. Anybody else is going to have issues with experience or playing too high or not having enough functional strength, so they'll need to take a couple of years in an NFL weight room to develop. All these different things. You have to be willing, if your goal is left tackle, to take a much, much bigger risk if you trade out of that 7th spot.
Trevor, do you think that if you do take that risk, is it worth in this case, Dane Brugler had a 2nd next year and a 4th in this year's draft. Is it worth that risk to move off of Alt or Fashanu to take one of those risks that you mentioned?
It's worth it if you're okay with not having a day one left tackle. In other words, a day one starter.
So then the answer is no, because the Titans need a left tackle, and there is no left tackle in free agency.
In that case, you're staying where you are, and you're taking Joe Alt as long as he's available, and if not, you're taking Fashanu. Because anybody else at left tackle is going to be a risk. Troy Fautanu is not graded high enough to take at 7. You wouldn't take him at 7. But the other two guys you could take at 7.
Trevor Maddich is with us here on the program. Coming up next, the receivers, how they ran, and what does Trevor think about free agency with the Titans and all that cap space you guys talk about. We'll do that next. Trevor Maddich, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters, and ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, Trevor Matich is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters, and by ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Trevor, those receivers ran so damn fast at the Combine over the weekend. What did we make of it and what it means for the 38th pick? And I'll tell you this right now. I think some of these guys are going to fly off the board, but I still think some of these dudes that ran Lad McConkey 4.39, Xavier Worthy 4.21, Xavier Leggett 4.39, I think some of those guys may be there at 38. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, I think they might be. I thought that was fantastic because of the fact that the Titans don't just need a receiver. They need a receiver that can take the top off the defense. They need speed at defense, and that is absolutely critical for them. So there were so many guys. I mean, there were 9 guys that ran 4.4 or better, and a whole bunch of others that were 4.41, 4.43, guys that were still in a range where if they can actually play the position, they've got the speed to get it done. So I think they're going to have some really good choices there in the second round.
Trevor, if you had to pick between Xavier Leggett, Xavier Worthy, and Lad McConkey for the Titans, who would you pick?
Well, if Worthy's there, we talked about him last week. I mean, Worthy is in that role of, the Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill. He's in the role of Tyreek Hill where the defense just has to stay back. They've got to double cover him. There's no way they can let him go. And it's not just because Worthy ran a 4.21, which is the fastest combine in the history of the combine. It's because it gets on the field. When you watch him on tape at Texas, I mean, he blows past defenders on deep routes. But then on the short and intermediate routes, when he catches the ball, if he's not tackled immediately and he takes off, I mean, he takes off. And his yards after the catch are just electrifying. And so that kind of a guy will open everything up for everybody else. Now, he has had a problem with drops, but he was better in 2023 than he was in 2022. So that is good. But I don't know that he'll be there, and that's the problem, because his 40 time will probably get him pushed up into the first round. We talk about Tyreek Hill. Well, before he was at Miami, he was winning Super Bowls with the Chiefs, and they just couldn't afford to pay him, so they went ahead and let him go. And they have struggled at receiver since. This last year, they won the Super Bowl in spite of a terrible overall wide receiver room, not because of it. And they're picking at number 32. I just can't see that guy going beyond number 32 in the Chiefs if he's available. But there are a couple other guys that I think would be really good there. His teammate, Adonai Mitchell at Texas, is phenomenal as well. He ran in the 4.3s. He's much taller than Xavier Worthy. He's much bigger, and he's a fantastic deep threat as well. A guy that is being mocked to the Titans right now by several people is Lad McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. He ran 4.39, and he clocked in at height at 6 feet, so he's not that tiny guy that we thought. He's the kind of a guy that has a phenomenal route runner. He uncovers at all 3 levels. There's 2 issues with him. One is that he's been banged up a lot at Georgia, so durability might be a question. And the other one is a couple of years ago in 22 at Georgia, he had trouble tracking the ball deep. So he could get deep, he could get open deep, but he didn't finish sometimes. At the Combine, on one of his last reps, they threw him a deep ball. He had trouble tracking that. And so is that a trend with him, or is that something that is not necessarily who he is? That's one thing that the Titans would have to think about, because if Lad McConkey were there, then he wouldn't necessarily be the huge deep threat guy, but he would be the fastest receiver on this team, I believe, and still be able to get down the field and make those things happen with the added advantage of being able to get open on any of the routes.
Trevor Matich is our guest here on the program. So with free agency a week away, basically, I do wonder this, which is it as imperative as I think it is that the Titans come away from free agency with a starting center, a starting right tackle, a starting corner, and then other pieces like an inside linebacker that they don't have to necessarily get on day one, but center, right tackle, and corner, because they're going to go left tackle and receiver in the draft, are imperative on day one of free agency. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I agree with that, Jared, because it's not a question of, should they acquire players in these places. We know that they've got so many needs all over the roster. It's borderline ridiculous. The question is, where do they go to get them? If they want a starting left tackle, then they've really got to go to the draft. And if you want one of the best ones available that you can count on starting on day one, at least having it be the best risk possible that he'll start on day one, then you have to stay at number 7. And you've got to take probably Joe Alt there if he's available, or Fashanu from Penn State if Alt is not. You don't want to go to free agency for that. With corner, there's a bunch of good corners available in the draft. But from a receiver standpoint, I think just like the left tackle position, free agency isn't going to offer a whole lot of options, especially because Mike Evans of Tampa Bay re-signed. T. Higgins, I think, just got tagged by the Bengals. A whole bunch of really good receivers are just not available now in free agency, and so the draft is where they want to go. And I wouldn't go past their pick high in the second round to get that receiver. They will be able to get blazing speed with that second-round pick if they stay there, but they need to make sure they pick the right guy. And I think they're better off going that direction and then adding a veteran receiver that maybe they can count on. I mean, Calvin Ridley, is he a guy you want to count on? You know, there's other guys out there. Hollywood Brown, okay, but are you really getting the kind of guy that's going to be a long-term Titan and be happy about it? So I think you can add a guy like that to the room for experience and depth. In the meantime, you're going to build through the draft at that position. And then when you go to the positions you mentioned, Jared, center and right guard, and then to a lesser extent, in my opinion, right tackle are important for them, but especially center. And there are some very good centers available in the draft that'll be there in the second round. But I think they're better off because of the pool of centers available in free agency, going with free agents there. And I like, you and I have talked about Tyler Biotish from the Cowboys a lot at center for the Titans. I really like him. He could be a steady guy in there for a number of years until they can draft a younger guy and get him developed. So, yes, left tackle and receiver are going to need to come from the draft because the free agent pool there is problematic. And the other positions will have to come from free agency because you've got some options there that aren't going to be available to the Titans in the draft because they don't have a third-round pick.
Trevor Matich is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters, and by ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Trevor, great stuff. We will talk next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep, Trevor Matich, as always. And I've been telling you guys that, I don't care who's available in the fourth round. That guy is not going to start right away. It's just not how this works. All right, the trade deadline is on Friday in the NHL. Predators general manager Barry Trotz just signed Tommy Novak to an extension. Could more extensions be coming? Plus the winning streak, plus the chemistry, plus the cap space. We'll get into that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios, Bridgestone Arena. Tonight, 7 o'clock, Predators go for 9 in a row. Barry Trotz is here, presented by Gary Force Acura. 9 in a row. I told you in St. Louis, I said, hey, this team's about to go on a heater. I didn't think it was going to be 8 in a row.
You were right. I didn't think we were going on this kind of heater.
I did not either, but it's as I told you the other day, this is the most fun I've had watching this team in the last 6 years or so, but here we are. The trade deadline is on Friday. Last week you came on the show, you said, if I can't get a deal done with Tommy Novak, I will not lose Tommy Novak for nothing. Mm-hmm. Surprise! You got a deal done with Tommy Novak. Where were you guys at this time last week, and what put it across the goal line?
Well, what really put it across the goal line is that you started getting calls, and people are looking for, those sort of rentals at the center ice position. Tommy was in a unique situation. He was making a low value dollar and produced at a pretty high level. So he was a little bit of that Tanner Jeannot unicorn type of player where some of those contending teams could actually fit them in their cap. He'd be a really good player for them, and you probably get a rental. But we also know that he's a good player too. And we got to a point with him and his agent and Tommy, and said, what's the grand plan? How can we get this done? And I think it's a win-win for us. I think the dollar value, because where we are in terms of our salary cap, next couple of years are tough because of the retentions on Duchesne's money really goes up. So we have to really manage that dollar and the term for guys in the next in anything we do going forward here for the next couple of years. But at the same time, we want to be flexible enough where we can still still allow our young guys to come in and play. So just getting real value deal. And then, Tommy Novak's been a homegrown guy. He's a great story. His number is, I think, a fair number where, here in Nashville, Tennessee, it probably goes 30% further than it does in some other markets and a lot of other markets. So it's a good piece, I think, also where Tommy fits with the group going forward in the next couple of years. And then he's still in an age where he's still got another contract after that, for sure. And, him and Alex are sort of in that same age group, I guess. And so that's how I'm trying to approach it, is that there's also another contract on the other side with the agents. I know everybody goes in wanting long term, but the reality is that doesn't work for the teams all the time.
Where do you think you are now that deal's out of the way? Where do you think you are with Carrier and Trennan as pending UFAs? Should we expect more signings to come here, or is Novak it?
Well, I think we're going to try. I think that's we are trying. I think that's the answer can only come from their representatives. There's been some offers made, and from that standpoint, we'll just have to play a little bit of chicken and the egg type of thing. They're wanting to know where we are going forward. They'll make an offer, we make an offer, counter offer, and we're through that all process. So there's a certain point where that's it for me. I gotta stop. I gotta hold the line for certain guys, and if they want to cross the line, then we have to maybe make change. At the same time, we can hang on to those guys and use those guys as free agents.
So to that point, when it comes to, let's use Carrier as the example here. Stastny is probably ready at Milwaukee, definitely will be ready by next year to be in the NHL lineup. Mollendijk, long-term, absolutely is part of the plan. If you do extend Carrier, knowing that you've got a nice term on Lausanne and that McDonough is here for a while and you signed Luke Schenn this offseason, are there enough spots to go around for your defense and what you want that to be?
Yeah, I think there is. We've been very fortunate this year that, injury-wise, knock on wood, we have not had a lot of injuries, and especially at positions. I think the only time that we had multiple injuries at one position, I think, was when Glass and Novak both got hurt roughly at in the same period, and they weren't available. We were fortunate. We had guys like Parson and that could step in there and do a job. So we were fortunate that way that we had those people around to do that. But we've been very, very fortunate. I haven't seen a back end stay as healthy as we have. through the first 60-some games.
So you're basically saying, hey, if I sign Carrier, it's not going to take a spot away from Mullendijk or a spot away from Stastny down the road.
No, absolutely not. I think that's why the contract terms and all those things are very well thought out. We do a plan, 4 and 5 years out, looking at different options. If we do this, what's the reaction, not next year, but 3 or 4 years down the road? Because there's guys that come up with waivers that, for the average fan, they don't care about that. But there's certain guys that they have to clear waivers, and we've got some good prospects that are timed out, like a fan Igor in Milwaukee. I mean, we have to decide if he's going to be on our team next year, or we look to have to move him because he's an asset, or you lose him on waivers for nothing, and then you don't want to do that. So. You have to sort of time everything out, and that's part of the business part, which sometimes is, it makes it very, very difficult for managers and even fans to understand that, why are we moving this guy now? He's still a pretty good player for us.
Barry Trotz is with us, presented by Gary Force Acura. 3 weeks ago, you sat right there and you said, I will let the team decide what they're going to be, buyers or sellers. If they prove they're sellers, I'll sell. If they prove they're buyers, I will buy. I think over the last 8 games, we can agree that they've answered that question for you. Yet at the same time, I look at your roster, I look at your lineup, and I don't see guys I want to take out. I don't want to go add a forward to take a Mark Jankowski out of the lineup because I think he's playing great right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what does being a buyer in this instance mean, knowing that you've got a team in Milwaukee that just won 19 games in a row, and you've got a team here that's won 8 in a row and certainly don't want to screw around with the lineup here, and yet do you feel like maybe you owe it to the team to make a move to say, hey, I made a move to make a move?
Yeah, I want to make the right move. I mean, you're absolutely right. You're spot on when you talk about Milwaukee. Like, we're going into the, you go into the free agency and the prices are, I can tell you right now, the prices are ridiculous for what general managers are asking for players. Mm-hmm. For rentals and all that, I think it's quite ridiculous. But neither here nor there. I'm a rookie GM. I don't know a whole lot.
Well, maybe you should be asking for the ridiculous prices yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I'm looking for the right guys. But I'm really looking if we're looking for a player, is Parsonen better than the player that we're acquiring? Mm-hmm. Is Tomasino better than the player we're acquiring? If they are, then I'm not going to acquire them. And then also looking at Stastny better than the defenseman that we might be able to acquire. We look at that and we say, absolutely. And I think it's a great path for us. If we get into the playoffs and we're healthy and, these guys are our replacements and they're better than the guys we are acquiring, what a great thing for their development, for our team, for the continuity in the locker room, all that I'm very fine with that. But I'm also looking at where we would have some holes. If this guy went down, how would that affect our team in terms of, do we have a replacement? Can we be sustainable that way? So I'm looking at all those things. And I've coached for a long time, and I know when you go acquire a player, especially the higher up he is, if there's not really, every time you get a higher player that say is a first or second line guy, it affects 3 or 4 guys down the chain because the guy that was in the first line is now on the second line, and the guy in the second line is all that. And the other thing that I have to be very, very conscious of, not everybody plays like the Nashville Predators. Some teams are more of a backup, I'll say less aggressive type team. Those guys don't fit, and they have a hard time emulating what we're trying to do.
Sure.
So those are the things that I have to, with our staff and our coaching staff, figure out who would be the guys would be the best fit for what we do on a nightly basis, which guys will help us complete our team the best and also give us the depth that we need to go in a playoff series that's very physical usually, and there's always injuries, and I'll tell you what, there's guys that play hurt in the playoffs, but you got to get to the playoffs, and you got another 18, 19, 20 games, and you don't know what's going to happen. There's always it gets ramped up. Everybody's trying to get in the playoffs. The games get harder, and all of a sudden guys start getting hurt.
So I want your opinion on this, and I hate giving you mine on the front end, but I'm going to, which is when it comes to the trade deadline, I think it's kind of overrated. Like, I think it's more of a TV thing, and sometimes maybe like a general manager who might get fired thing, than it is like, this guy you acquired and dealt the first-round pick is the reason that you are in the Western Conference Final. And every year we see all these guys move, and every year there's a team in the Stanley, and they might have made one minor move, and it didn't really do much. Like when this team went to the Cup final, they traded a fourth-round pick for P.A. Parento, and I don't even know if he got into the games. Like, I think it's ridiculous. So with that being said, when you're talking about trying to balance what Parsonen would be or what Tomasino would be, how much do you balance the idea that a second-round pick is Luke Evangelista or a second-round pick is Roman Josi? So if you trade a second-round pick to get somebody, it may not even help you win anything, but you may have just traded away Roman Josi.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you weigh. There's certain teams that are in their window, and be it their team, their marketplace, their ownership, the pressure of job security, all plays into the decision-making process. And I know teams that are all in. I mean, here's something that people don't realize. There was 16 first-round picks that went through the trade deadline last year. 16 first-round picks were traded for players. There's only one cup. And, there's a lot of assets that went out the door, but you have to try. So you try to think about the best things. I know one of the things that we did in my many years of coaching is I remember one year in Nashville here, it was very similar. We were a team that probably wasn't expected to make the playoffs. We jumped in, we got in, and everybody was adding all these big time names and all that, and we just made a little tweak here and there. And they were the best ones. They were guys like Brad Bombardier, a name like that most people don't remember, and Shane Knighty, who's now broadcasting, and people like that. That was probably our best type of acquisitions. We just tweaked the group, made them a little bit better, but kept the chemistry. Chemistry is the X factor. You look at a team like Florida last year. Trade deadline, they didn't know if they're getting in or not. They didn't really do a whole lot. They just sort of said, we'll see what we do. And they got in and they went to the finals. So chemistry is one of those X factors that you can't put a value on, but it is something that's real.
Now I'm going to flip on the other side. Barry Trotz with us, presented by Gary Force Acura, which is when it comes to Carrier, when it comes to Trennan, maybe even Fabro, whomever, you're saying the prices are out there right now are ridiculous. Well, I think we can all agree that the mindset going into the season, big picture, was not necessarily about the 2024 Nashville Predators, but about 25, 26, 27.
Yeah.
If somebody offers you something for Alexander Carrier, even though your team's winning and you're a buyer, how do you balance out, this might hurt the 24 Predators who are playing great, who the fans are excited about, right now looks like, is in playoff position. But I did go into the season thinking about 25, 26, 27. Yep. How do you manage that? Is there any way that these things can't be mutually exclusive?
Well, they can be a little bit. The great thing about the situation that we are in is that, Milwaukee is a good example. We have a lot of prospects coming. Mm-hmm. B, we have a lot of draft capital, and, if we just chip away a little bit, we might just be fine. It might be okay to say, I'm going to turn my nose away from a second-round pick for this group because this group deserves that. I might just do that because this group has done everything they can to be in a position to be in the playoffs. So I'm okay with that, and I think everybody would understand that, because I could go and get a second pick, but then I could replace that guy, and everybody's asking for a second pick. So. Mm-hmm. Or even a first pick, and so it might not even be worth it. But you have to listen, you have to see what the needs are, and there's certain teams that are expected to go all the way, and they're looking for a defenseman, they're looking for a winger or a centerman, and the pressure to get that they feel will get them over the hump, it gets pretty I'll say intense for that team and that individual, and then all of a sudden you get a first, and then you got to go, I got it. I'll take that first, and I just got to suck it up, and we'll.
So no matter how much this team's winning, if somebody knocks your socks off on something, from a business standpoint, you got to do it for the 25, 26, 27 Predators.
Yeah, I think I do. I think that would be fair.
Barry Trotz is with us. What about facilitating trades? I actually wasted Brian Poyle's time the other day, which I apologize for, because I called Bill Wickett. I said, wait a minute. What are the rules here on facilitating these trades? I didn't know this would be that big. You got cap space. 75% of the playoff teams in this league don't have it. And so in order to work a deal, you could retain salary, get something in exchange. You don't even give up anything. You don't get the player. But you can only do that for one spot, Johansson and Ekholm.
Yeah. So we have one spot, and I've already been, a couple teams have already approached me for, would you do this? And I said, absolutely, I would do it, but I won't do it right now because it would be unfair, because I think, they want to do it for a little smaller pieces. We're talking $1 million is a small piece. But if someone comes and says, I want this is the game changer for my team, I can do this, but you got to retain 4. Well, that's probably a second-round pick. And all of a sudden you get that second-round pick for really giving up nothing. So I'm going to hold on to that till probably the last day if I can, and try to use it and try to get a real I put the feelers out for that for sure. And when you look at Cap Friendly, you look at all these sites that have all that, it's pretty obvious we have lots of room. We just have the one retention. So we want to use the one retention to get something. If we can't get that big deal, then we'll settle on a smaller one.
Is there a possibility that somebody could call you and say, Barry, I'm trying to make this other deal over here, but I've got this guy who's making $4 million. He's a pending UFA. I don't want him anymore. I got to get rid of him. I just want you to take his $4 million. And in this case, you acquire, you trade, say, a 5th or a 6th. They give you a 2nd and the player they don't want, and then you just waive that player. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, no, all that's a possibility. Correct. You can do so many things with that. But usually what happens is that a team will come to you and you'll say, we've got this player that if we move it, we can do something else. He's a high price. He doesn't fit in what we want to do this year in the playoffs, but he might be a fit and he might not be a fit. Then we can talk, be it a pick or prospect or something like that. Usually those guys you don't really want to waive because there's another rule where you only allow 4 recalls. Mm-hmm. So you might want to just keep that player's depth, and if you want to recall someone, be it say Parsons down or Tomasino, and you say it's way better that this player Tomasino or Parsons come up and play ahead of this guy. That's part of the deal, and so you usually don't send those guys down on waivers, but you could.
Mm-hmm. Barry Trotz is with us. What about when it comes to where you sit right now and the excitement for this playoff run, but also the young guys at Milwaukee that maybe haven't made an appearance yet? We've talked about if you need to go down and get Parsons or if you need to go down and get Tomasino, what if you want a bottom 6 guy, you want to go down and get LaRue? Mm-hmm. What if you want to get Kimmel for scoring depth? Are those guys on the cusp? I know Svechkov's hurt, but are those guys on the cusp of being able to come up to Nashville and help the Predators, or would you want to keep them down in Milwaukee to maybe let them bake a little bit?
I think probably in Kimmel's situation, I would love to have seen him play some games here, but we just didn't have the injuries. But I would think that might be a lot for him. Like he seems like he's been around forever, but he's still 19 years old. But LaRue, I think, is a little more mature. He's a year older. And he's played in that sort of bottom. He could come up here and play on the 4th line and be excellent and kill penalties. He really could. I just think he's a really smart player. He's a really good prospect, and he's just gaining traction all the time. So he would be a guy that you would bypass and would have an opportunity to play here for sure.
So I do have to ask this. Philip Forsberg, Barry, has not been participating in practices and morning skates. Is there an injury he's working through where he's good to go in the games, but maybe Steve McNair when it comes to practice?
Yeah, no, there's no question. Just quite frankly, it's just it's actually a cut, and it keeps getting irritated. So we'd rather have them for the games and the practices. It's just in a place that if you the more you play and the more you practice, the more it gets irritated. So we're just trying to get it healed up so he can have a good long run, but it's nothing serious at all.
So I go on these rants because the NFL salary cap is fake, because you can do all kinds of things in order to do whatever you want. I do think that your cap is real. Like, I think the NHL cap is a hard cap, and that, teams. Vegas just acquired Anthony Mantha from Washington. How does Vegas has like $45 million on long-term IR? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, well, that's one thing that we've never touched yet. As an organization, we've never gone into that long-term injury, which is for people out there. If you have a person who's in long-term injury, you can use that money to acquire other players. So essentially, if you have, an extra $10-12 million in guys that are hurt long-term, that's why teams, picked up Shea Weber in a sense before he got traded to Arizona. They wanted to use some of that long-term injury money. It's a little bit of I think the long-term injury was essentially put in there for the right reason when you get teams that get hit with a lot of injuries, that you're able to fill your roster and be competitive on the ice. What's happened is there's a little loophole that general managers have been really smart at, and lawyers and all that they found a loophole where they can just take this money and move players around. So that's what the teams that are in that win now mode, they will use that. And you see a team like Tampa used it last year, Colorado the year before, Vegas a little bit. So, those, and then all of a sudden that star player shows up game one of the playoffs, and they've got an extra $10 million they were able to add at the trade deadline, which if you don't go there, then you don't have. So it does make about it can be a $15 to $20 million difference in payroll for a team that uses it and a team that doesn't.
Last one for you. 2 games on this homestand, Montreal and Buffalo ahead of the deadline. But we talked about what was up with this team at home, trying to figure out why this team. I went to the game on Saturday night. I thought the crowd Saturday night might have been the best crowd of the season.
Yep.
And I felt as if, the score looked lopsided, but the game really wasn't.
No.
And I do wonder, when you look back on the effect that the fans have had through this 8-game winning streak, what do you make of it?
Well, I think they're the seventh man. I mean, you saw it on Saturday. I think they can energize us. I think they, especially in the third periods, when they're cheering and they're standing up, and you get that final timeout and they're standing, and it's pretty special. It's pretty electric. And if you're a player on the bench, I was a coach on the bench, and when they used to do that, it was electric. You want to, as a player and a coach, you just don't want to disappoint anybody, and so you're digging in, you're committed, you're going the extra mile. Those are the things that fans, their good energy brings to a group. I'll tell you what, there's nothing, when there's bad energy, it just sucks more energy. When there's good energy, it just gives more good energy. So I think our fans have been instrumental since we came back. I'm a little bit concerned about these 2 games. They're non-playoff teams, but they're very talented. They're both very talented. Montreal's in a rebuild, but they've got tons of speed and they got lots of talent. And same with Buffalo. Buffalo was probably expected to make the leap this year. They've been loading up with high picks and developing them. But at the same time, those are the harder games because, both teams are out of the playoff race, essentially, maybe not mathematically, and they're playing looser. And the pressure's on the Preds. We're expected to win. These will be hard games. They're hard mental games, but our guys will be up for it. I think they know what's at stake.
You're going to hate this. I have said, every game throughout this winning streak, I'm like, it's a big game. That St. Louis game was a big game. The Vegas game was a big game. The L.A. game, given where they were in the standings. The Anaheim and San Jose, I was worried about those being trap games. Ottawa, that looked like it could be a trap game. Last week, Minnesota came in here. Their playoff lives. Saturday felt kind of like a measuring stick game. I didn't say today was a big game.
Yeah, but
And I worry that's,
it is a big game. It's a huge game because these two, these games right before the trade deadline are huge games. You can push teams out. St. Louis had a big win the other night. I think it was in Philadelphia. They still there. They're going, okay, if they stumble, we're right on their heels again. So don't stumble. Our job is to push the other teams out right now. Make them feel like that mountain's too high to climb. Make it feel like, hey, we're not get there. The math doesn't work unless they really go on a 8-game losing streak. And so these games are worth just as much as Colorado and Minnesota, those type of teams, because those points matter right now. You can push teams out. If you don't push them out mathematically, you can push them out mentally.
Mm-hmm. Barry Trotz, great stuff as always, presented by Gary Force Acura. Enjoy the next couple of days here. Should be very exciting.
It should be. And I just, with everybody, like I said, the fans, you guys are the seventh. And if we're going to get to the playoffs, we're going to need you. So you're a big part of it.
Barry Trotz, Stillman and Company. We roll along 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Again, we are live at Bridgestone Arena where the Predators tonight are taking on the Montreal Canadiens. And as Barry Trotz is doing another interview right now in front of us, it says on the TV, NHL Network, when will the Predators' current 8-game win streak end? Hopefully not tonight against Montreal. Just a couple things Barry hit on when talking about being buyers. Said that this team is buyers and that the prices out there to buy right now at the deadline are, quote, ridiculous. Also talking about how if they don't end up with a second-round pick, say on a trade for a guy like Carrier, they can live with that for right now for this team. Trying to work out a deal with Carrier and Trennan. We don't know if they'll end up getting the deal done or not, but that they are negotiating with the agents and that they would be interested in bringing them back. He is waiting until right up until the end of the deadline for a potential big trade in which the Predators could utilize their cap space in order to get a better return as a facilitator, in which they could get a second-round pick, he used as an example, for nothing, and that Philip Forsberg is dealing with a cut that keeps, did he say infected, Max? Was that the
Irritated.
word? Irritated, that's it. That keeps getting re-irritated. That's why he's missing the practices. 615-737-1025. We'll get your reaction to all of that, and we'll do it next. First, Window Nation. That's right, I love Window Nation. March is a critical time to check your home's windows. Go to windownation.com if you've got bad windows. If you've got bad windows, I mean, it's going to get down some of these nights into the 20s, and then some of these days it's going to be towards the 70s, the 80s. It's teasing me for boat season, and then it gets so cold at night that I know that it's going to be too cold to ever get on the water anytime soon. Well, if you got bad windows, that's a big problem. Because once you've got that issue, you're going to be jacking up the heat at night, you're going to be turning it down, and then you have to flip on the AC, and your energy costs are going to soar. So let Window Nation replace those windows for you, and let them get you the energy-efficient windows that will save you money every month. That's right. And not only will it save you money every month, it'll save you money right now. Because right now, for every 2 windows you buy, you'll get 2 windows for free. Plus, 0 down, 0 interest, and no payments for 24 months. That's Window Nation. Again, those are my guys. They came out to my home. They said, Jared, your windows are great. You don't need to replace your windows. That's how I know you can trust them. Again, right now, every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 windows free, 0 down, 0 interest, and no payments for 24 months. Call 866-90NATION or visit windownation.com today. Stillman and Company, we are live at Bridgestone Arena. Again, Barry Trotz saying on our program that they are buyers, which is obviously not a surprise, but trying to get a deal done with Carrier and with Trennan. It didn't really seem, I was going to try to see if I can, lean him one way or another. Didn't seem like he was leaning one way or another on that. I am concerned, and I voiced that with him about the idea of, well, what does that mean for Mullendijk, and what does that mean for Stasny? And it got me a little worried, Ian. I'm not going to lie.
About what?
Why. Because he kept talking about how, he was basically baking injuries into the equation.
He did bring that up, how they've been remarkably healthy on the blue line.
And that's why we're, hey now. Knock on that wood. 615-737-1025. And our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And again, the trade deadline is on Friday. And I will say this, the one thing that he did today that I will be disappointed if it doesn't happen is I want to use that salary retention spot on a big contract, and I want to get a big return.
Well, I think he has a good strategy.
I totally understand the strategy.
Wait to the last minute, right? See who gets desperate.
And he talked about a second-round pick. Could you imagine a second-round pick for nothing?
That would be pretty cool.
Especially given the fact that, Roman Yossi was a second-round pick. That's a real player. Or a future trade chip. 615-737-1025 here on the program. Texter into the text line says, get somebody who will take Carrier. So I don't think that, I think that he doesn't want to break up Carrier and Lazan. And that's what winning will do. I've always told you guys is for years we would be doing these, ahead of the trade deadline or during the offseason. And I cannot tell you how many calls and texts I got over the years saying they need to trade Johansson and Duchesne. And every time I was like, guys, nobody wants the players that you don't want. Nobody wants Andre Dillard. Nobody wants those players. They want the good players. And so, I'm not the biggest Carrier fan in the world, and I think he can be replaced. And so, if I was GM, I'd be at night, when everybody, when I'm talking to the circle of trust, and I don't think I'm in Barry Trotz's circle of trust. I'll tell you that right now. But if I was sitting there, with the circle of trust, and I was saying, okay, do we do this? If the prices are ridiculous, as he said, do we put out, Ian, let's say a first-round pick for Carrier?
Yeah, you got to do that. You got to do a first-round pick.
You have to make that trade, right?
Yeah.
And Barry said that if you got Barry said that if he does get knocked off his side, he will make the business decision.
The Athletic has Alexander Carrier as their 38th best trade player on the big board. So
here's my theory, okay, when it comes to all of this. Saros, Carrier, whoever, Stillman, doesn't matter. There are a lot of Stillmans in hockey, though, so that could be confusing. But I think that in each case, Barry's open to talking about literally everything that he can talk about. And it just depends on what you're willing to pay. So, The Athletic wrote a story today about, should the Predators be trading UC Saros? And I woke up this morning and I read that story, and I was kind of like, wait a minute, hold on. Should they trade UC Saros? Hold on, wait a minute. Is this story from 3 weeks ago? What are we doing? This team's won 8 in a row. They said they're taking him off the market. If you call up and you offer enough, he'll give you the player. Same with Carrier, same with Trennan, same with any of these guys. So I don't think it's as binary as he's on the market, he's off the market. I think if Barry gets offered a first-round pick for Alexander Carrier, he'd make the trade. But as he said, the prices are ridiculous. And that's why I think a first-round pick would be ridiculous. But the prices, he said, were ridiculous. And Granlund got you a second-rounder last year. And as has been well documented on the program today, Ian, Granlund sucks. Has been well documented. So I don't make of that what you will. Texter into the text line says that I believe in Barry, but I really hope that he doesn't put a lot of the future Pred stock into this 8-game streak. We've all seen how well they've played, but they aren't technically contenders, and they still need to make some moves to get them up there. First of all, I don't think there's any move he can make that makes them a contender. If you don't think they're a contender right now, if you don't think that Forsberg and O'Reilly, with an Andrew Burnett power play, with Yossi at the top of his game, with Soros at the top of his game, if you don't think that's good enough to win the cup, and I don't, but if you don't think that's good enough, there is not a move they can make that can put them there. It just doesn't exist. They can't acquire Elias Pettersson and put him out there and say, okay, now we add him with Forsberg and O'Reilly, right? You can't do that. So there's not a move that he can make in order to do that, and I think Barry made it abundantly clear when he was talking. I thought the most measured thing that he said on this program was comparing a rental player that he could trade a draft pick for and bring in and use some of their cap space on, but is that player better than Juuso Parssinen? And I go back to the deadlines since I've been covering the Predators. You know, I was a Predators fan, and I remember when they made the move for the other Kostitsyn and they brought back Radulov. And
Andre, yeah.
It was I couldn't tell you which.
Yeah, they had
Kostitsyn was
Sergei,
already
and
here
then they
which
brought
one
in
had.
Andre, yeah.
They both sucked. But
they didn't suck. Sergei was fine for a year or two.
Andre sucked and went out partying too
Yeah,
much.
that did not work out well.
Yeah. So, but I wasn't covering the team then. So when I started covering the team, right, the first one was a first-round pick for Cody Franzen and, what was it, Matt Santorelli?
Mike Santorelli, maybe?
Mike Santorelli, okay. Thumbs down. The next year, I don't think in 2016 they did anything at the deadline. Although Joe Rexroad wrote at The Athletic this week that on January 6th they acquired Ryan Johansson at the deadline. And I lit Joe's phone up when I saw that. I'm like, that is some lazy freaking stuff right there. In 2017, they traded a pick. I think it was a fourth rounder for P.A. Parenteau. Didn't need him. And they called everybody up, for that 2017 run. And P.A. Parenteau was not needed. 2018 first-round pick for Ryan Hartman. Don't get me started. 2019 Wayne Simmons and Mikhail Granlund. We've already spent enough time today talking about Mikhail Granlund. 2020, they didn't do anything, and they had a fringe team. And you talk about blowing it. They could have traded Granlund and Craig Smith and didn't because they just wanted to hold on. That was the stuff that makes me mad. Holding on to Carrier when you know you're good, that's different. 21, a fourth-rounder for Eric Goodbranson. That didn't do anything. 2022, a second-round pick for Lozon. That was a terrible trade. Although, Lozon's starting to turn it around now, and I'm starting to like Lozon. And that is saying something, Ian, because I have been very hard when it comes to Jeremy Lassonde.
Yeah.
As Hal would say.
Yeah, he's stepping it up.
He is playing. He's out there skating in the offensive zone
He's
around
always
the
been
net.
I think he's always been a good skater. It was just he was almost too aggressive at times. I think there was times last year, I can't remember who I was talking to, like, what is he doing up there? Like, get back. So, maybe the new system helps everybody.
I think the new system is much better for him.
Yeah.
But again, that wasn't technically a good deadline trade. And then last year they sold off and it was great. So I don't believe in the rental. I just don't think it matters that much. So I don't want the rentals. I don't want them because I don't believe in it. And I think, again, the most measured thing he said is, just go get Parssinen. I just go get Tomasino. Just go get Stastny. Get Askarov. I go get my guys in Milwaukee. Predators game day, they go for 9 in a row. Caroline thinks it's a big game. Barry thinks it's a big game. I do not. I'm just going to be honest with you. They go for 9 in a row tonight. Predators game day's next. Stillman and Company let's talk about Twice Daily, though. Twice Daily, boy, I tell you, they made me a turkey wrap, and it was freaking on fire. It was fabulous. They got the kiosks there right now where you can literally just go in when it comes to Twice Daily, and you can just make, whether it's a wrap, whether it's a sandwich, a pizza, a snack, whatever it might be, you can just order it right there at the kiosk. Or you can be like me. You can download the Twice Daily White Bison app, and you can punch in the mobile order yourself, And then when you get there, it is waiting for you hot right there. Boom, pick it up, go. I stopped at the one right there on Hillsborough Road in Green Hills on my way in to the stadium today, and it was just freaking fabulous. Their new wraps are Italian, ham and cheddar, turkey and Swiss, and Nashville hot chicken. And they're made to order with your favorite toppings. So again, that's twice daily, fresh all day. Predators Game Day is presented by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. Get your house seen, heard, and sold with TJ. He's my realtor. Tonight, The Predators go for win number 9 in a row against the Montreal Canadiens, who are, by the way, just being honest here, this is who shows on, they are terrible. And so this could be a potential trap game, but the Predators have seemed to avoid those lately. Montreal comes in at 23, 28, and 10. That is good for 56 points. The Predators, meanwhile, 35, 25, and 2. That is good for 72 points. Taking a look at the standings, which used to be very touch and go on this program a couple weeks ago, the Predators are comfortably in a playoff spot, as the standings would indicate right now, as they are in the Western Conference wild card, and they are kind of jockeying with LA 72 points each. St. Louis is 5 points behind with a game in hand. So you're not totally in, but you are for the most part. Max will have you with the pregame show. The Predators go for 9 in a row. That's next. Stillman and Company. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 2.